And saves the day.
Math 6 through 12. Pia.
And perhaps we could start off by looking at the Minnesota and type course because she wanted to make sure they're accurate. So if we would all take a minute or two and read through those. Yeah, to change, tell them if it needs to change or edited.
Anybody else need it?
Oh, is it?
I think, does everybody have a copy? Oh, okay, so you the first time and then you lose.
Yeah,
I'm just.
the only thing I noticed that was missing was when we voted to make you the facilitator.
Oh, yeah, because that was a boring start.
Right. But I didn't know if we needed to be put in.
So you got the facilitator? Right. Yeah.
I think when I was looking, because we had talked about, where is it? Working with science and K-5.
And that was about the scientific notation.
Okay, scientific notation.
It's like
Okay. And I'm not sure, I guess, and it is true that we definitely need to collaborate with them. Was that an action step? I guess, and maybe we need to decide who's going to be doing that, but, and I think Nancy took care of the others, did you know?
My email included 3B to ask them symmetry, 3D about the fractions, and 3D1, and then 3D2 telling them that we weren't doing anything differently with their grade, and then on the back, and 4C1. And then the other action items I put a check next to, other than, okay, 4A, I don't have a check next to, I have a question mark next to, that's the science one. And then 4B1, we already gave them access. 4B2, we've already kind of taken care of that. 4B3, I already dropped that in the Dropbox this morning. And I wasn't sure about 4C2. I'm just gonna look in the mirror and ask myself advice.
Well, we had talked about whether that was something in the.
Absolutely, right. I'm just being a goof as usual.
And I don't really care. But my name is Kathy Battles, so I answer war, bad act, so I do I really care? No. But if it's going to be something official.
No, I want it to be accurate.
Yeah. But if it's battle act, battle ship.
So we need to make a motion to accept that. Is there anything else
Anybody else see that needs to be revised, added?
So, well, just clarified, it's not that anything's wrong with what Ann wrote down here, but who were we gonna seek advice from for the ability? Do we want to?
I thought it was more of we were kind of tabling it. We were
Among
gonna come back
ourselves?
to it. Yeah, that's what I thought we meant by it, but, like, discuss it and then come back to it later and be, I don't know.
Well, I think for some people, and I don't know what the reason for this is, but the ability to see a three-dimensional drawing and see what the three-dimensional figure drawn there on is really intended to represent is difficult, and I don't know if that's a vision issue. I think it might be. I think it's a little hard for me. I'm not saying it shouldn't be in here, but, I mean, if we were gonna seek advice on that, you know.
I guess I was just trying to sort of characterize the discussions in our group.
Oh, of course.
We were talking about the developmental appropriateness and is it
Right.
more in career tech, and so maybe that there was expertise outside specific math people in this group that we might wanna go and confer with and say, be here.
I think it's something we can act on individually and go back next time and see what we think. If the advice maybe somebody else would be just as thinking about it.
Yeah.
I would, if we're gonna leave this action item in, then the one thing I'd like clarified is, we agreed that we would draw three-dimensional shapes and nets of those when we're talking about prisons and things like that. The thing that we specified were the projections and perspective drawings. So that's what we were questioning. The other part we weren't questioning is the way I remember it.
Right.
Yes, okay. So how would that be better phrased?
Just, maybe the group is going to consider whether to include projections and perspective drawings. Or, and once again, I don't know if that's action, I don't know who.
Yeah, if that's all it is, it's not, it was just something, like, you know, things that needed to be done, maybe outside this group, that's why they stuff with K-6 and stuff with science.
Who do you think we should ask? Should we ask the Daves and the Nancys and the,
I was thinking about it yesterday, and I had another kind of a little story. I had a couple students last year that Nevada has a really good welding school, and I had a couple of students went down there. They were trying to get a scholarship. They messed up right at the beginning and got dismissed from the competition because they didn't look at the drawing properly, and they started doing some things backwards of the way they were supposed to.
so do you think it's an important skill?
I'd like them to be able to be more successful than getting dismissed at the beginning.
In welding, they do have top right front views, and they have to put that together to make the piece. My husband's a machinist, same thing. I mean, now, industry is going more and more to solids, so they can get this shape and spin it around on the computer. But if it's on paper, even in machining, which is, they're desperately wanting people to go into, because there are none, it's still sometimes top right front view. So it is an important industry skill.
And there are a couple of things in the geometry common core that we kind of try to make mean that sometimes for them. I don't know, if we did in middle school, are they gonna, if that's the only place, they're not necessarily gonna do any better in that situation anyway.
Well, how about if the middle school people, we saw our advice, that was our action.
That's fine, if it's no different than just sort of the general haggling you that we've done on the other things, then I'll just take that action item out.
Yeah.
I think that was
That's fine.
Okay, so the only action we still need to take is get with the science group. And do you want, well, once we agree to accept these, and then do you want to need to pursue who that person is?
Yeah, that would be good, because I don't know who the 6 to 12 person would be, but yeah, that would be very easy.
Clara Benyon. That's who they elected chair.
Thank you.
Need a motion? I make a motion that we approve the minutes, we switch C to, just took it out, leave, and all other things have been acted on except for 4A, so I make a motion, we accept the amended minutes.
The one little change at the top.
Oh, yes, we had Kathy.
Second.
So Manny had a motion and it's been seconded, is there any discussion? All of those in favor?
All those thanking Anne for doing them.
Yes. Woo-hoo! High five on that one. Definitely. Okay, so right before we left to have lunch, we were working on the number and operations. And I think we had covered the number and operations in the Massachusetts standard, but yet there's still some things in the Common Core document that we need to look at. And I believe we were down through up into complex numbers with that we need and amplification, so now we need to look at that.
Essentially, only 1 and 2.
With the expectation as well.
And 7.
1 and 2 of the complex, yeah, you're right, 1, 2, and 7, I think of what's left of that number of operations is all that's required of, or expected of all students to do. And I think that 1, I mean, kids have to know that there's a complex number that's gonna pop up in the problems that they operate and work with, it's gonna end up happening, so they need to know that.
No, yeah, it was 7. I don't have a problem with that.
1, 2, and 7, do we have a problem with 1, 2, and 7, the way either are more to the expectations?
I don't have a problem with the expectations. I wonder if the wording of 2 is really so good. We've got that commutative, associative, and distributed properties mentioned again.
Right.
I mean, I think we do, obviously, we do want kids to be able to, add, subtract, and multiply them.
Yeah.
I don't know if that language about the properties is necessary.
I don't think it's necessary.
And maybe it just creates more confusion. So I know that, like if you just look at the ones that are not marked with the plus, and this is what we're taking as our target for this year, as far as the algebra 2 thing, so they don't have to be able to, generate an equivalent expression without an I in the denominator.
Right.
Right. I didn't want to say simplified. So, I mean, and I think that's okay. I think that's an okay place to stop, although I don't.
I think, if classroom teacher can go beyond that, if they want, which I would, but to put it on, to think this is gonna be something that all students have to do and be assessed by all students.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know. I love the idea of teaching the conjugate and doing some of that stuff, but I can take it over.
I don't think it's a have-to thing, I think it's an okay thing, but I'm not sure that it's a have-to thing for all kids. And do we, go in discussion, so I think 1, and we're talking about 2, I'm not sure we need to say the properties that you're gonna use, the community associated with certain property. I mean, that we're gonna, if we want to keep it in there, use the relationship I squared equals -1, I think that's kind of implied from 1 that, yes. And I would say that we might be able to streamline that down just to add, subtract, and multiply complex numbers. Do we think we need what's before that there on?
Yeah, I don't think so. And then the thing it leaves open, which is not really specified in here. And again, I'm trying to think through, generate equivalent expressions for, powers of I. We always look at that and say, when you teach that, I squared is -1, I to the 3 is -I to the 4 is 1, and then based on that, I to the 21st is what I, or whatever, those kinds of things. I don't necessarily see those specifically implied in this, but I think you would do that. So I don't know if it's going to say it, powers of I.
I'll put it out here to the side, powers of I, that'll help us remember.
It's kind of covered in multiple topics. I mean, it is
Yeah, that's true.
but it's a very special case.
Right. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I just wonder if it's not sort of put in here specifically if people will think to do it.
And again, it's that fine balance of being prescriptive.
Right.
But, you know, we don't wanna really be prescriptive, but yet there are some nuances that they really should be doing with their kids, but it gives us that fine balance of what do we do.
Well, and maybe does your assessment question answer that? I mean, whether you think it's important enough to be assessed?
And I don't know if it's that important to be assessed.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't. I mean, I don't think it is. I mean, I think I swear you gotta afford to know that, but we
It's
don't
always
know
one
that.
of the questions for high school teachers.
I can just see, yeah, that they're just gonna
There's a
have a
version.
thousand drill practice problems.
It's I to the 272,000. I mean, that's what they're like.
That's what it is, yeah. That's what it is.
So
Which
maybe
is really
maybe
important.
something to consider for that introduction.
Yeah, there you
Have
go.
conversations about this.
Yes.
Now, is this like the all the I stuff, is that something that shows up on the Algebra 1 EOC?
No, it should
Okay, I don't think so.
complex numbers.
The complex numbers will be algebra two,
That's okay, that's okay.
yeah, well, that's what it is now.
I think it's gonna be more on the level of algebra 1 if they're solving the quadratic. That there's 0, 1, or 2 solution, or no solution,
That's
so they would
possible.
know that real solution, so they would be able to stipulate that, but we certainly wouldn't expect them to say this.
It's kind of from our CDE perspective, I was
Right.
trying to stipulate something into which classes would.
Right, yeah, I think that this would fit into complex, and the kids can solve quadratic equations in algebra 1 that had number of roots, but they would not be expected to get those. Okay, should we, I mean, even though these are plus standards, should we go through and read the plus standards to see if we agree that for students that are going on to, science and engineering, that these would be important elements to have, or if students they wanted to add these to an honors class, or how do we wanna handle the plus standards that we look at here? There's quite a few.
Well, I love vectors and matrices. But that's really a question, isn't it, whether we prescribe the pre-calc curriculum.
Because I don't know that we have, that we're looking at pre-calc. I think we're looking at algebra 1, geometry, and algebra 2. This, you know, is a pre-calc, some of it could be taught in algebra 2, but some of it really belongs in a pre-calculus class. So I don't know, I mean, I think to leave them here that people do them, but then they can, I think we need to look at what's really important and what's not, and the plus standards, we may agree those are important, but do we keep plus standards here? And allow them to, I mean, that's a topic, what do you guys think? Maggie's go back.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, you know, about the conjugates and stuff like that, they're not really not much further of a leap than the conjugates with radicals, and so it's not a difficult concept.
It seems like, just as a general philosophy of me, trying to think about why you have plus standards. There's a couple of reasons. One would be to influence teachers to go the extra mile and more. One would be to impress people looking at your standards. Look at the really heavy duty things that we could do. You know, I mean, seriously, I think that's part of why they're in there.
I agree.
Both, I guess, are good reasons. The one thing that I think Julie mentioned earlier is, I mean, it's a silly thing, but in some way we need to be more obvious that they're plus. Maybe they need to be separated completely,
But that's
or
not
with a
bad.
big bar below them and say, you know, because people do look at it and say, oh, goodness. Teachers do that without even the direction to say they're plus. But
They do. For a long while, the teachers in my district were under the impression that everything in the class belonged in algebra 2. That would get you to turn. That would be, I mean, there's no one that thinks they can do that in here, so.
I think they're good things, and I think there are good reasons to leave these all in there. But I certainly think they're plus, so I really wanted to note that.
And so we should go back and then read maybe through them, but somehow to note that these are not required. They won't be on the state assessment. However, your honors students, those kids going into math and engineering careers, wanna look at putting those in algebra 2 or into a pre-calculus class.
You know, and that might be a good way to do it, you know, that, and just be real direct about it, and just say, you know, additional topics, you know, suggested for, honors classes, or at least that in my district, that's how we do honors, is all the regular stuff, and then we do, you know, selected other things as well. And so you can put those in, you know, as just you know, a list of choices for, you know, and that way you have them in there, you know, for Bob's second reason.
As a separate page, and kind of like maybe it's something separate, like additional topics for honors classes or classes beyond algebra 2.
Right. And then, you know, and that's not to suggest that you would want all of those things in a single honors class, but that these are a list of suggested topics for those, when, you know, schools or districts are writing their curriculum, they can look at it and choose from.
And just have those as a separate page as opposed to within the needs of what we're doing. Because when you put it all in here, it kind of gets.
Yeah, and you almost can read down it and you're looking for one that's not a plus, or you can look at it and you almost end up feeling cross-eyed if you're doing that. You know?
Or
Well,
it's
because-
easy to miss one that's not a plus standard one.
Because I think we always said
I
7.
just said,
So it's, they had all these plus standards and 7 was mixed in the
Yeah.
middle of it.
And that's probably an algebra 1, or at least for sure algebra 1 honors, it would be in there.
Yeah, and it's a definite by the end of algebra 2, they just have that. And in algebra 1, because I would expect the kids to be able to solve the equations but not have the solutions to them. They would know there's so many real solutions, need to find all real solutions to the problem and not necessarily solve it for complex numbers in algebra 1. Algebra 2 definitely. So, because I'm the same with you, when I first looked at these, I totally missed 7 because it's mixed in with everything else. So we like 1, 2, and 3, but we need to revisit those. 1, under the complex numbers, we like, I think I didn't say, I shouldn't say we like, I don't think there's any disagreement with. And 2, we said get rid of most of what's in front of add, subtract, multiply complex numbers.
Keep it active, 7, probably.
And 7, we need to make sure we keep that, yeah.
And then when you do write your suggested additional topics, I don't think you need this much detail. I mean, multiply a vector by a scalar, be done, or maybe perform operations on vectors, end of sentence. I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
although it would be far more impressive.
We can have all the things we see our kids do. And I know too, Julie, we talked about matrices, and that I taught matrices in algebra 2, but I'm not sure that it's something that is a testable item or something that has to be done. There are a lot of good things that you can do with that. I don't know, Maggie, what's your thought on that?
It doesn't necessarily have to be done. I personally, when I've taught algebra 2, have always taught matrices in algebra 2. And although I will say at the college level, a lot of colleges for college algebra are getting away from matrices. So,
it's true. In fact, I think,
Yeah.
go back and look at that document, I don't remember what finally happened, but I remember a big discussion when we made that document through, you know, what we need to get into. A lot of people said, well, we wanted to have matrices, a lot of people said, we don't even do matrices in college algebra, so I think it was not being one thing.
college algebra, we just things that keep getting more watered down and more watered down.
Well, the reason.
Yeah.
That's another.
That's another.
Is that college algebra taught in college, or is that what some high schools are
It's
teaching us?
some of
supposed to
it's
be the
dual
same.
enrollment,
It's supposed to be
it's the same thing.
Dual enrollment's supposed to be the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it goes back to sometimes with matrices, with the calculating, with the technology, it's just another approach and another way of teaching it. And I mean, I still remember my first couple of years of teaching algebra 2, I taught solving systems of equations with 5 variables, 5 unknowns without a calculator. So
Yeah.
do we do that now?
No.
No.
Yeah.
And
And
so
we can talk about college algebra with me if you want, because I got a lot of thoughts on that. Why it's.
that's a whole nother
that's-
committee.
Some teachers do like to include like some linear programming
Oh, I
in
love
the
linear
pre-calc
programming.
class. I think that's still popular with some teachers, and at least it's good to make, but again, is
And
there
that could
time
be
for it
like-
in algebra two?
And that goes back to dealing in, it probably wouldn't be in here, but would be in systems, when you look at solving systems, linear programming, because I love linear programming, but yet again,
But then if you do, I thought of it because then if you teach it with matrices.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. So is there anything that we really have an objection to? I mean, when we look at the plus standards, we agree, do we agree that we're gonna take those and put those into a separate document so that it doesn't get confused, everything here, and then I think it doesn't look so overwhelming. Yeah, it doesn't look so overwhelming to go back and look at that.
I'll make
So-
one other comment about
Sure.
that. If we move on this one, there are a lot of plus things we're talking about. This is gonna be a really short one, and we've kind of hinted that we need to figure out our categories, and
Right,
I'm just saying that this one's gonna look shorter potentially if we keep these categories in the other one.
yeah,
I'm by no means
But
opposed
on
to
the
doing
other
that.
hand, that's the way all of them, if you look at them, the later you go in grade level, the smaller number gets.
Mhm, yeah.
Because you do more number.
But I'm just saying compared
First
to the
grade
other,
than you do.
I'm saying compared to the other high school
Right,
ones.
right, but I mean, I think that's
I mean,
gonna
this
be,
one will seem somewhat shorter,
I think
not
it's
that I'm
natural.
opposed to that, I just
Yeah.
wanted to point that out.
well, and I think fewer doesn't mean we spend all that much less time on them, it's that we really go into depth in the things that we do with them, and we're able to continue to use them throughout whatever we do. So, yeah, hopefully they've reached most of their number sense.
it feels
by the
like,
time
I
we
mean, I think by the time we get to this point, number sense is filling in the gaps of the
Mhm.
Yes.
numbers we haven't talked about.
And I really actually think that's the way it's gonna kind of look if we do that,
Yeah,
but I just wanted to point that.
And that's the way it looks in both of these, I think.
Yeah. so okay, that's good. So are we done, do we need to look at the plus standards, or is that something that when we talk, if we can tweak those and adjust those as we need to develop?
Later.
Okay, so hey, we're done with number, woo-hoo, yeah. So the next one, do we go back to the Massachusetts document thing?
Well, it's pattern relations and algebra, the next one, common core
Or is algebra, so that makes sense to go back
Sort of the same.
and have some of the.
I would just say that I like the SSE category in the common core as a whole. I mean, there may be things more like that part of it. See structure and expressions, I think that's a nice. And they even use some of the language we talked about here with number 3, choose and produce an equivalent form of an expression, as opposed to just simplifying, but something that we're gonna use it for something, so let's make it look the way we need it to. So I like that kind of, that section there, I like the language of it.
Well, and I like that they talk about interpret expressions that represent defined in terms of its context.
Yes.
You know, that it's not just naked numbers, that what we're doing is dealing with things in terms of context.
We have the whole thing with the modeling, most of those that you just mentioned have a little star.
And this might be one case where it might actually help, and maybe these aren't the best examples, but interpreting complicated expressions by viewing one or more of their parts as a single entity. I think giving some clear guidelines is for teachers to know what that means, whether it's this example or some other, as well as I think a lot of teachers, when I ask them, when you look at the mathematical practices and seeing structure, what does that mean? And so to have some examples that we can give to high school teachers about when we're talking about structure, we're not, because some people think structure is a T-chart or they're getting that mixed up with the tools. So when we talk about structure, maybe having some examples. Mathematically, when we talk about structures, we're not talking about buildings, but what types of things are we talking about and having a discussion? So by looking at 1 and 2 there, I do like what's there. Is there any problem with the language? or
This-
any objection to any of the standards.
This interpreting parts, both those A and B,
Mhm.
just hitting me this morning, you know, how many times in statistics,
Yes,
where we have a formula, that yes, you can memorize that formula, but sometimes we want that formula to look this way because it makes sense what we're doing when we see it that way. I'm thinking of sums of squares and things
Right.
like that. There's an easier way to calculate it. We have a calculation formula, but we need to look at this formula, because my students say, why do we ever look at that one? Let's use the easy one.
Mhm.
Well, because that one tells you what you're doing, and you see the structure of it.
Like standard deviation.
Yes, right,
Mhm.
exactly. You know, I mean, the original definition of standard deviation is not really the easiest way to calculate it.
no,
Subtracting the mean from every single value and
But you
squaring it, but it helps you see what's going on. It's important that you understand this idea of sum of squares and statistics. So, and that's just my statistic example, but I think there's examples of that in all areas of mathematics where
and I think that would be helpful, you know, if we can come up somehow with some examples or something like that, without being too prescriptive, but to help teachers understand what that really means, because it is important, but I think it hasn't been phrased like that before, and so
Well, and
teachers are not.
I mean, I think the example they give here on the P times 1 plus
I
R
don't
N is not a bad example.
I don't think it
I
is
think that's one we use in college algebra too.
Mm.
Talk about.
For it.
Don't drop.
I mean, I think that's a nice example of what does that where does that 1 plus R come from? And the
Right.
idea that it's the rate plus 1 because you get to keep the money you already have in there, and you know.
Right, which relates back to percentages, it's 100% of what you
Right,
originally
that
had,
structure
plus the
has,
rate percent.
it makes sense, we need it
Yes.
to make sense, and
Right.
not just be a structure, so.
Yeah, and that's a difficult concept for kids to get, and algebra too, is to put it in that way. So I think that keeping that, the structures that they have there, giving them some guidelines is a good thing. But is there anything with the wording that anybody objects to, or what's that?
I think it can be a little confusing for your honors, your 8th grade teachers, just because
Okay, so help us.
we don't think
Which ones?
that way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
You don't think that way?
well, because you guys have,
I know.
we don't have the higher parts of what you guys are doing
Right.
to know exactly. So sometimes things that are very clear to you, since we haven't taught the upper level math, then we're like, okay, hang on, what is it that
So
they're
this
wanting?
is, and this is important, and that's a good point, because it's important in Algebra 1 as well as in Algebra 2. And this example really makes sense, I think, for Algebra 2 students. Is there something that we can come up with that would be a better
Maybe.
example?
Look at the language on the number 1 in the Massachusetts part. I feel like it's going to some of the same direction, but the language is considerably different.
10B1, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, 10B1. And some of those words at the beginning, which I don't know if those help any at all, Tiffany, but they're just saying it in a completely different way, and yet some of those words to me are potentially going some of the same direction that we've just been talking about.
Yeah, I couldn't help but think too, when we're talking about structure, you know, it's a little like, you know, for us, I think it's a little like Potter Stewart trying to define pornography. It's you know it when you see it,
Right.
but trying to come up with a definition for what that really means is a little bit more challenging. So, I mean, I appreciate it. I think I appreciate the idea of structure, but maybe there's a better way to communicate that.
So,
Well, I mean, I think, 1A is more clear,
I agree.
interpret the parts.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's.
But sometimes the parts aren't just a single thing, that's what I think the point of B is,
Mhm.
Yeah,
but it maybe could be said in a better way.
Yeah, I guess in certain, and maybe A is more something we're talking about, and I know we may necessarily split it there, but maybe A is more something that's in Algebra 1. And B might be more related to some of the things that we might do in Algebra 2.
Yeah.
Daisy, you have a frown on your face.
Yeah, I do.
So, yeah, go
I
ahead.
can't see anything there that you guys have discussed that I didn't teach in Algebra 1 for
But is it clear,
25 years.
is it clear, do you think, though, to, the
Well,
teachers. And I
I
agree with you.
understood what she was saying, but what I hear you saying is separate part of it to algebra 1 and part to algebra 2. And there isn't anything there, including the x to the fourth minus y to the fourth, or whatever it said there,
Mhm.
that was not taught in algebra 1 for
Right,
me.
I agree.
And we teach that in algebra 1 too.
Right.
We do.
I think it was 1B that was it the wording there that was confusing you, think?
Yeah, I just
Clarify the wording.
I think, or give, yeah, a good example,
Better
or
example.
that helps a lot. Sometimes just seeing the example of what it means, because we don't use the same verbiage, because we tend to use more of the verbiage and things that we're using with our middle school kids. And then sometimes it's really like we go to this to see what kind of verbiage we need to use, but sometimes we are emailing high school teachers to say why, what does this mean, and things like that.
So maybe if we gave, an example, maybe a different example or several examples or something of that nature, do you think would help?
Yeah,
To clarify?
I think so, but
So-
I don't want it to be tied, because I do know that we tend to do that, but
So somehow
And I
help.
do think those standards also apply to algebra 2, but
Yes, they do.
the examples and things they're getting here, I think, are one-ish.
Yeah, I think that is an interesting situation, and that 1B, the example makes sense, but I don't know that the language that precedes it does. So, I mean, I get it, I guess it looks like they're saying, consider the structural parts, sort of as individuals, the terms, factors, coefficients, but also, in some sort of sub-combination or subgroup of them, such as in that example.
I do think the example helps clarify, but like if I were just to read interpret complicated expressions by grouping one or more of their parts as a single entity, I do that would be that long.
Yeah, me too.
So basically, we need, I think we're fine with what it does, but maybe a little bit of
Yeah.
clarification with that.
Uh, 10P1 in Massachusetts is humongous.
Yes.
It's like, that's a whole course almost.
Exactly.
There's the semester.
Yeah.
Bam.
It is so broad that
Yeah, it is.
it's maybe too broad.
Well, it's very broad, we were trying to come up with words and all.
Yeah.
And that's why you saw that look on my face for a minute, I'm like, okay, hang on.
There's just a huge number of words there, and we're trying to think of
And they're
words,
important words.
and each one of those words has quite a bit to it.
Yeah, definitely. And Fibonacci. Fibonacci has no.
Describe, complete, extend, analyze, generalize, and create. And when you know anything else you think of there, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Too many
Very
things.
good.
I get the point, but
But at least they stopped at exponential, they didn't go to logarithm. Anything beyond that.
Saving that for algebra 2.
I mean, I think the big picture of what they want there is in this.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a little better spelled out to me in this case, but
Yeah, like you said, this is a semester course, I think. And I also kind of think when you look at 10 and P2, isn't that also kind of broad into interpreting structures of expressions or structures of equations? I don't maybe, and also don't we kind of do that in middle school as
Yeah.
well?
I mean,
Is
it
that
is,
middle school
it is
concept?
that, but it's very specific to line linear relationships, and I think we do that.
And that's pretty much, would you say that 10P2 is pretty much a middle school idea? Do you feel that's encompassed within the document?
Linear is an
Yeah.
area we covered well in
Yeah.
8th grade.
So 10P2 is something that's basically done in 8th grade. And I think when it jumps to 10P3, that jumps to a whole other category in the Common Core document, so maybe we should finish up scene structures and expressions 3 and 4.
Say that again.
Should we make sure, seeing structures and expressions, we really talked about 1 and 2. We talked too explicitly about 3 and 4.
3 is covered, the factory containing square, at least the A and B products. And those are covered in 10B5 in the Massachusetts standards, although they do say I don't want to get ahead of it, but demonstrate an understanding of the equivalence of the methods, and I would argue that the methods are not equivalent. And so I'm not sure that you can really say that, but like here with C, 3C, in column 4, there you've got your rational exponents, which at least currently we don't do until algebra 2. I don't think.
But I think, when we were, I guess we didn't talk about it, we're talking about rational exponents, we haven't really addressed that specifically, but of course, we talked about them, but I don't know if we talked about what
We
force.
talked about
We
it,
talked about whether or not to use it in 8th grade.
Yes, we did.
Three is all in algebra 1.
Well,
under common form. So
Which are correct.
the rational exponents.
All of
Yeah.
3 is A, B,
Yeah.
C.
A, B, and C.
Okay. So, and that's why I say, because this year's group I have, I guess, what are you got it, so.
They do specify it's just quadratic and exponential.
And I guess if we're gonna talk about, I don't disagree with what's there in the grade at all. I don't know about. And I think it would depend on 1B, how far they go into completing their quadratic expression to reveal the maximum or minimum value. I'm hoping that people aren't going to go all the way to just using the quadratic formulas, not if I'm using those in the I think it's fairly explicit for people to understand that. Tiffany, what do you think?
We had math completing square because our high school teachers didn't do it in their algebra, but we put it back in last year.
So if you said you put it back in last year, how did it do?
They did okay,
So you feel that's
took them
appropriate for
all.
algebra 1 and that's okay?
but yeah, they did it, and we did it via factors, and then we showed them quadratic last, so that they wouldn't
To see
automatically.
that first?
Yeah. Now, when given a choice, did most of them go back to that one? Like if we just, said choose your method, not most of the time, that's okay.
Oh, that's when you have to look at, safe tracks? What's the October 20th?
Yes,
9 o'clock.
as long as there's no snow.
Yeah. Do you remember in Kansas City, we had an October surprise and it was, all the
Be
trees.
safe, Sam.
Yep,
Safe
and
tracks.
likewise.
Safe tracks. I do like that it talks about, because I don't think we really explicitly talk too much about properties of exponents of transform expressions to exponential functions. I do like that, because whether it's exponential functions or just numerical values, to manipulate, to know that 2 to the 1/2 squared, that I can rewrite 2 to the 1/2 squared and get 2 to the first power, how I can manipulate and rewrite that. To get a common base, if I'm going to try to do something, how do I get it down to that common base? And I think probably before that, that's not spent
Well,
much time
it's-
on.
I mean, you use it to find the actual per unit growth factor as opposed to over, like talking about money, and you look at 10 years of time,
Right,
to get it to an annual thing, you have to use fractional exponents.
right,
Makes perfect sense there in that context.
yeah, it does. So but I like the fact that it's spelled out, because that's something that we really probably didn't spend enough time to do it before, so.
Yeah.
And kids really struggle with that. And so currently you don't do that in algebra one, is that what you're saying?
What we did last year, it was on the list, but it was one of those
Those
things
things that
that
are on the list, yeah, I know, that's.
snow days and we, okay, have that one.
Yeah, that's what we're.
Exponential, common core, or
Algebra one.
algebra one. So linear,
Quadratic,
quadratic, exponential.
In general,
in general.
yes, sometimes they throw an absolute value around there.
And there's piecewise.
But I think those are the things that you can be, that they mostly focus on.
It looks like it's the same.
Yeah. So,
I think a little bit different than Massachusetts documents, it says find the solutions to quadratic equations, oh, it says with real world stuff. By completing this stuff. Because I don't think up here, it doesn't explicitly say use completing the square to find the roots to find maximum minimum values of the function.
Well, then this one says. The items factor just has them in two different areas.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, is that ambiguous in 10P5? Do you have to know all three methods, or can you just do the quadratic formula and nothing else? That's, and I know in Common Core specifically are, looking at that vertex form, so, which I don't think is bad.
And it's just a personal thing for me to see when you give kids the quadratic formula, they never develop it, but they have no idea where it comes from or why. So I think yeah, don't even get me going on that. But I think that we get into a danger when we just give them formulas too early without them really developing an understanding of what they're doing. So I've always had issues with quadratic formula being introduced in algebra 1 because teachers usually just hand it to them and they go on. The kids really don't know where it comes from and why. It's very seldom is it really developed.
But you would go ahead and complete the square in Common One.
I think completing the square is a good thing for them to understanding what a perfect square trinomial is. That's not that difficult, I don't think, for algebra 1 kids to really understand and comprehend and use.
They have to think about it a lot in the honors group, but it's good for them
Yeah.
to.
Because I taught that a lot in my algebra 1 classes, and they really picked up on completing the square, that what didn't seem to be that difficult. And then they could identify what was a perfect square trinomial and what wasn't. I don't know how I feel about the quadratic formula, but in an algebra 1 class, but I'd be open.
Well, I can see that being the end of it. I mean, I can see, your exponential, this is how I sort of think of it, but, when a lot of your focus on exponential is to sort of have something to compare to linear,
Right.
and, because they do make such a nice contrast,
Yes.
but then your quadratics are, just special. And so, but then I do see that completing the square and the vertex form to be, really useful and good, and I don't see why you couldn't have that be the end of algebra 1 and the formula in algebra 2. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I see that as being fine.
I will say, we just give them the formula.
What'd you say, Kevin?
I said, I will say, we just give them the formula for that. I'm not saying that we should just be doing that, but that's what we do.
We make, I mean, I don't anymore, I don't make my husband do it or anything, where he goes and buys his candy. We always made him derive it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we can't change it. To this point, that's all that's been done. It's like, okay, now that we've done it, now that we've solved it these other ways.
I kind of like what Julie said. I mean, I think if nothing else, just the lack of immediacy of here's one way to do it, now here's the easy way. I mean,
Well, I just know my students now for two, when we actually did derive the quadratic formula, once they actually said, so this is not magic, it's really real, it really does come from someone they really have community. You know, they
But you
just,
realize a lot of them don't care, they'd rather have the magic.
Mhm.
If you could give them
they
some
never got the
games,
magic, I guess I
yeah,
never
they
did
would
the
know.
magic one.
The cheat codes are all
It
about
was
video
probably
games.
the culminating thing in
Right.
Algebra 1. I mean, that was, it was just their precursor to Algebra 2.
You mean proving the
If,
quadratic.
Deriving it
Right.
and then using it to make sure that they knew
Yeah.
how to identify those
Yeah.
then
quantities.
maybe that's some verbiage that we need to put in there.
Well, if it goes from algebra 1 to algebra 2, you're gonna have to teach complete square root in algebra 2.
Yes, you
Well, I mean, wherever it's taught, you know,
can
just
have
to
it right
eliminate the teachers just getting to it.
right at the very end, and not let them use it.
Yeah.
I think, I,
Well, and there are things in geometry, I believe, that they will use. They will have to do this, and do we really want them completing the square or doing whatever every time in geometry, just because they haven't had algebra 2 and the algebra 2 teacher can't say, ta-da.
That's true.
I mean, they're studying quadratics in algebra 1, that's a main focus. Linear is down here. Quadratics and exponentials are in algebra 1, and that's part of that whole piece, bringing it full, I don't want to say circle, because you'll think I'm talking about.
Yeah, I see that, yeah. I think it would be a good thing at the very end, yeah. it makes sense.
I think we just really need to emphasize that it's not something that we just want given to the students.
Which is
It's
why I
something
said maybe
really-
derive.
that we really want them to derive it and understand what does A represent, you know, what those components and what those parts represent.
So we won't be prescriptive, we'll just say, you may only teach this in May.
There you go.
That's what
There
it's
you go. I actually think if I can find it, there was a document I might want to think it was from the College Board at one time that kind of addressed that issue of how not to just give them the quadratic formula, but the importance of writing it. If we could find something like that they had said that we would have, and
Don't smile till October,
Oh, baby.
because what will happen is, in the teachers that I've worked with Algebra 1 before, they don't even teach them to do anything with factoring whatsoever, they just give them quadratic formula.
We
To start with.
we don't do
That's
that.
That's what happens,
But
and
then
that's,
Because that doesn't work on a lot of things you need to use factoring. for.
that's correct, and I think that what happens is the Algebra 1 teachers, if they don't teach me on that, they don't get that.
Because the quadratic formula is about finding a solution to an equation, but factoring is about
Yes.
rewriting expressions. It's a
Right.
different thing, so,
It's
yeah.
a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was too sadistic to give it to them.
Somehow I'm not surprised.
One of our Algebra 1 teachers used to have kids do a rap about the quadratic formula just right at the end of the year, and that was just an assignment that they would do. And so I see the error in how to fix that now is we just have to do a rap of deriving.
Yeah.
Methods, so.
Well, I went better than that. I had a friend that when she went out to dinner, she would give the waiter an extra $20 tip if they could state the quadratic formula. So if they, without going anywhere, wherever you say right off the top of your head, her tip, she'd give them an extra $20 if they could state the quadratic formula. Bribery usually works. Okay, so we, 3, we talked about. We did not talk about 4 on seeing the structure derive the formula for the sum of a finite geometric series when the common ratio is not 1. And then use the formula to solve problems.
It's listed as algebra 2 up here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I believe that should be algebra 2. I believe it should be algebra 1. Do we have any disagreement about having this right?
I realize you guys are talking about, where you place that in the different forms, but that's you're not pulling that from Common Core document.
Yes, we are.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's in the appendix.
Oh,
Tells
That's
you
the
which-
appendix.
We're taking it as advisement. I mean, that's where it is now.
Well, and it's, and in reality, that's where those things are taught, that is normally taught in algebra too.
Yeah, but it's,
I don't, what
that's
it's
an
not
important
taught.
thing is that, to know is that you,
When,
to
when I look
decide
at
which
four,
thing goes in, you have to look at the appendix.
yeah, and that, when I'm looking at this for, I was hoping that we weren't saying we would think this would be an algebra one. I think this is definitely an algebra two.
By the way, I want to say that I'm saying that's where it is there, but I think that we're deciding that.
Absolutely.
That's just where it is in this
Yeah.
case.
Right. And I think traditionally, that's where it's always been taught as well, so.
But I get why you would have thought it was algebra one just because it says algebra over at the top there.
Yeah.
I could definitely see that.
Their example isn't too hard to grasp as far as
Yeah.
seeing that, creating them.
And I think the more that we can work with our kids on calculating payments on cars and credit cards and anything of that nature, the
I
better.
would usually, in my algebra one class, I would usually talk some about that example.
I did an example with my class one time, I let them use the graphing calculators where we compute how many payments they had to make. And the calculators came back, this thing we went through, and the calculators came back and said it's an error message. And they said, calculators give us an error message, and I said, do you know why? And he said, no, I said, because it only does 999 payments, you'll be dead before you even get paid off. And I think when you look in the Common Core document that APR one, I know people have a lot of issues that I talked with that first statement.
The whole close thing again?
Yeah,
it's
just
the same
analogous,
thing,
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's analogous to the integer, what does that really mean? If they're closed into that.
And then just down at the end, in case you were still awake when you got there, it says,
Oh, by the
subtract
way,
and multiply polynomials.
Yeah,
This small little phrase to take up this.
Yeah.
that's true.
So, really, I think they're getting at, is this what you're saying, it's the concept of closure, I think we have to say closure, that when you add, subtract, and multiply polynomials, you get another polynomial.
But it's really, the main important part is that you can add, subtract, and multiply.
Right.
Right.
Well, and they do have in the Massachusetts documents, that's pretty much what they say, add, subtract, and multiply polynomials, and then they also say divide polynomials by monomials. So that piece might be someplace else we might find in here, but I do agree that that students should be able to take a polynomial divided by a monomial. So, will we say that first part is not necessary? Understanding that the polynomial is form closure.
Yeah, I would say it's not necessary.
And would you include is it add, subtract, multiply, and multiply polynomials and divide polynomials by monomials? Is that really what we really wanted to say? Clear language, or is there something else?
And the divide polynomials by monomials, depending on what you mean by that, that might not result in a closed operation.
That's why it's not, if we took out closure, that's why.
Yeah.
We're doing that.
Right, but so I don't know if those go there, or if that's a question. And nor do I know that, if you wanna make it more confusing by dividing by monomials of lower degree than polynomial, I don't know. No, that's pretty awkward language, I think, too.
I think when it says perform arithmetic operations on polynomials, I think add, subtract, multiply polynomials and divide a polynomial by a monomial is pretty much what we're after. And I know that there's gonna be some issues though, that people are gonna ask about dividing polynomials by polynomials. I don't know if that's an algebra 2 item here, or is that beyond, not required for algebra 1, and I'm not sure that I remember seeing that. It might be there someplace, I don't remember seeing that.
Don't you think, remainder theorem,
Yeah.
APR two.
Yeah.
That would
It
be
goes-
good.
it goes to the, yeah, I think that's why it's separated.
That's separated out. So if we would, like, perform the recommended operations, what we're really after is adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing polynomials by, and dividing polynomials by monomials. Is
I
that
guess they
correct?
jump, I mean, I think 2 and 3 in the Common Core get more to the, why would you ever wanna divide a polynomial?
So on one, we're just really after the operations, so. Add, subtract, and multiply, and do we want to also include there, or are we gonna leave it to 2 and 3 to divide a polynomial by a monomial?
I would say it's not something that you're gonna do all in the same course.
Good question.
But those things all go together really well in a unit, I mean, or a poly-unit, but I mean, they do go together in that for teaching, I think, so.
And so, but if we put it all together, are we talking about one, add, subtract, multiply polynomials? And then divide a monomial by a polynomial by a monomial, I think is doable in algebra one.
I
A
think
polynomial
so.
by anything else I would not think so.
Right, yeah, my kids can all do that stuff, or I get them, so.
So the statement we said is probably appropriate for an algebra one class. So divide a polynomial by a monomial would be, Tiffany, you think that would be?
And the only strange thing up to now is, and I agree that I did that in algebra one as well, is that we've only talked about linear and quadratic and everything. And now in doing this, you're well beyond
Pretty low, yeah,
algebra two.
so you could, it's almost there.
Well, you could limit it, I mean, you could say, in algebra one, we're only gonna work with degree, whatever, I mean, you could stop it at that. I don't know.
And I'm not even making suggestions, Julie, I'm just saying the rest of our stuff has been confined to this, and that kind of goes outside, and I'm not really sure.
If you
Yeah.
do though, I mean, if you do that, and I agree you could do that, then it seems like you're just gonna do it again.
Yep.
From next year, all over again with, it's kinda like add 2-digit numbers, and next year we'll add 3-digit numbers, and next year we'll add 4-digit, I mean, it seems like we could just do it. I like better.
Just getting it done.
I don't know what I
They understand the rules, they understand the rules of before, prior to this, I think we're talking x squared times x to the third gives me x to the fifth, so I think we're working with exponents beyond a square and
Right. Cause you're saying you're gonna do linear, quadratic, and exponential models, you're gonna really get into the details of those first and second degree, and then exponentials. But then over here, you're just gonna do some, plain old algebraic manipulations, generating equivalent expressions, whatever you wanna call it. That's all it is, and then we're limiting it only by the fact that they just have to be polynomials, get the roots out and stuff, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's just my opinion about why they did it the way they did in Common Core, is that they did not just do division of polynomials in general, it's a bear.
yeah,
I think they tried to focus it on, why would we ever divide two polynomials? And so that's why they did the remainder theorem, identifying zeros, and, I mean, just in general, other than doing those things, why would we take a 5th degree polynomial and divide it by a 2nd degree polynomial?
fun.
Exactly,
It is fun.
it is fun, but,
So it's lazy Saturday afternoon.
so maybe there's no reason to do
And you know
the
what,
quadratic divided by linear.
I guess I would just say in all of this, and when you, it sounds to me like you're talking about some degree of difficulty there with the high dive. Remember, I know we don't like to do things for the assessment, but you already said the people who are writing the assessments tend to like to go for the most difficult version of it. So if you're worried about the kids not being able to take it to that nth degree, maybe you need to put that limit on what you put in the standard.
And see, that's why I was saying, for me, I would rather an assessment be about using division than just divide this by this. I'd rather it be more about, zeros or the remainder theorem or something more where we're gonna, where the result tells us something we wanna know, as opposed to just a computational kind of thing, but, I mean, you have to be able to do computation, I'm not saying that, I'm just,
Well, I think when they have to do what you're saying, then they have to do the competition to get there, to understand. And really, we really want kids to not just do it, but apply it. Why are we doing that? You know, yeah, we may need to do it on the afternoon because it's fun, but why do we want our kids to be able to do it? You know, what types of things we want them to be able to apply it to.
I'm gonna make another comment, I know we've already kind of talked about this and closed it, but one of the things I like, you got some kids that aren't going, I like showing, because we didn't have any materials into this, but like my upper students, the asymptotes that weren't linear, because all we had was linear asymptotes and doing some of that stuff, but for the students that aren't going some of those places, I kind of like the piece in the number one under the APR about, they're gonna be asking why, stuff about polynomials, why, you know, we're jumping into doing things with them.
Okay.
I like showing her some analogy that's analogous to the arithmetic we've been doing for years. We know we're making algebra abstract, but it's not, like we're talking about the quadratic formula,
Right.
It's not really magic.
No,
It does have connections with the real numbers that we've been doing.
right, right,
And I have always liked pointing that out.
Oh, I agree with you, and so, I think when I was talking about this, it was the language, and I'm talking about assessment, will say, is that an important assessment item? But I fully agree with you, that you need to know when we're dividing or multiplying polynomials together, that it's just like taking 20 plus 24 times 36, in other words, because I always did this with my classes, 24 times 36 made it much easier to write as 20 plus 4 and 40 minus 4. You know, to multiply that out might be much easier, another approach that they might be able to take a difficult arithmetic problem that we can really simplify, and how we use this, it's the same thing.
I definitely agree about the assessment piece, that I was worried if we're ignoring that altogether, there are teachers that are gonna be going.
And we're making a really long introduction, but yeah.
But their teachers are gonna be doing procedures, and the kids, depending on who they are, don't see any connection with anything.
Well, helping the kids making the connections is a really important part, and I think that's traditionally what's happened at high school. We just give them formulas and move on, memorize and move on, and then we'll forget tomorrow. And it's kind of like what we're talking about college algebra, and we were talking about that if we can do fewer things that go really, really, really well, then when they get to college algebra, you don't have to reteach it. They understand it, they know it, they can apply. That's what we want to get our kids to.
And then they're a little more mature, and they're able to draw on the analogies if they understood it well. So if we did look at something like this, if we did limit it and say, you know, and maybe with an eye towards the test, and teachers could do a little bit more, but if we did limit it, and I have to think about the language, but to say, you know, that you're gonna multiply, you know, binomials or first degree polynomials or something like that, and you're gonna limit it that way, so that they really spend time doing that, and you know, can explore that instead of just trying to get through it and go on to the next one that's got a fourth power in it.
and so if you do division, you'd be limited by quadratic or linear.
Yeah,
Yes.
and maybe that's not terrible for sure for algebra one. I mean, I don't know if we've
I can live
ever,
with that, yeah.
I don't know if we've ever separated it that way, but now that we're honing in on that, I'm not seeing that as a bad idea. Yes, but limiting the difficulty,
The degree of
the
difficulty.
degree
And
of
it wouldn't have to be backward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be all right. Never really thought about that before.
yeah, and then that comes back to Nancy's comment that what we've done is quadratics, and so then this comes back to that, and maybe that's the fewer deeper that we've all sort of
Yeah.
been okay with, if that's what it were, yeah.
to reword that, or how do we want to denote that so that we can make sure, I want to make sure we capture this idea.
Well, I think in one there, it's essentially add, subtract, multiply, and divide, using no polynomials of no degree higher than 2.
Divide,
That's what we're saying, right?
so no degree higher than 2 rather than just by monomial. Divide by no degree higher than. Because we had said divide by monomial, but do we want to?
Well, but I mean, if you look, I mean, remainder theorem and, you know,
And that's which is out more after 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, leave the monomial, because that would obviously not specify a degree. Although, well, you have to say first degree monomials. Right?
So we want to limit, is
So-
that just in algebra 1 or is that period? Are we saying algebra 1 limits first degree monomials?
Well, in algebra 2, presumably you're gonna come back and pick up some more functions of higher degree, and you're gonna wanna talk about end behavior and a whole bunch of stuff. So I was just thinking for algebra 1, doing, and maybe that is right, so something like add, subtract, and multiply first and second degree polynomials, dividing, would you have to limit it to second degree? No. Dividing first and second degree polynomials by first degree monomials. That starts sounding unwieldy, I know. But I'm not sure I'm thinking.
And
of a way
maybe,
to
I
do
think
it.
we have yet the kind of the gist of it, and then craft this like from algebra 1, and then how we were doing much the same thing in algebra 2, but this is the level to take it at.
So maybe that would be okay, and maybe kids could, really, really learn that instead of just being blown away by all those harder problems that aren't necessary at this level. I mean, I'm not trying to make it easy, I'm just,
And my only concern is that will kids then form a generalization about division, that whenever we divide two polynomials, the answer, like if we take x squared and divide it by x, if that's the highest way to take it, will they make a generalization that we always get a degree of 1 for an answer?
that's a great question. I mean, because I'm sort of responding, I thought Nancy's, point was an interesting, unique point. I mean, I don't know, would they draw that it's always 1 or that it's always 1 less?
Yes.
and then, I like Nancy's point too, but on the other hand, just to say it a little differently, we're gonna do other things with exponents higher than 2. So,
Next year, or?
no,
Yes,
I mean, even in
exponentials.
algebra 1,
Yes.
you're gonna do things with exponents of 3 and 4 when you're set,
We do a lot of examples.
so I mean,
We have the rules of exponents, so what do you do?
Rules of exponents were covered with them in 8th grade.
right, that's what I'm saying, but I mean,
Yeah,
but I mean, you don't have to wait till you've done cubic before you can mess with x to the 3rd power. So in the same regard, do you have to wait till you've done polynomials of degree higher than 2 before you can do operations with?
Well, and Tiffany, why don't you read what you just said? We were talking about rules of exponents,
They were in 8th grade, but I thought we said numerical in 8th
Right.
grade, and
Yeah,
so then
yeah.
we still have to bring in all of that, so. I think it's developmentally appropriate for algebra 1 to be able to add, subtract, and multiply polynomials. The kids seem to get it very well, they like it. And I think if you limit it, I don't wanna say it's a waste of time, but it almost feels like a waste of time because then you have to do so much more of it in algebra 2, and maybe you have to go back and redo it in algebra 2 regardless, the way it is right now.
To me, it's the divide that's the one that's the sticking
Yeah.
point. And,
Yeah.
we could just be like the mathematicians who did the college ratings thing, what they're saying, divide polynomials. That's all it said.
Well,
They don't need to tell what kind or whatever,
And I think and that's my fear in algebra 1, then the
Yeah.
teachers need some guidance in algebra.
Exactly, I agree.
I think in algebra 2, it's fair game. I think in algebra 1, we need some parameters about what our and we can hash that out now or hash that out later, but we need some.
Yeah, we can. I'm thinking some of the discussion sounds to me like we can talk about higher degree with monomials divided by monomials. And then if we have a multi-term polynomial, then we can talk about limiting it.
Right.
But since you've already got the rules with the numbers, you can do the rules with the monomials.
Mhm.
a higher degree, and then to do the
Can we
quadratics.
pass and come back to this?
Yeah.
This seems like a bomb to
Well, it
me.
might be, if we're gonna break up into groups and work on it, it could be something that either everybody thinks about, or an algebra 1 group thinks about, or something to hash out, and we can all
Well,
agree
I
on
think
what
it's
they
gonna
think.
kind of come back to what Tiffany said too, is that, okay, Algebra 1's doing everything, and so
Yeah.
we need to move some things around. Okay.
We need to break.
You ready? Okay, so so
We've
you,
got the group coming in.
or are they coming?
No?
They're
They're
not
not
coming? Okay. So we answered their questions, or they just don't?
I don't think they have specific questions.
Oh, so you just kind of frightened them up.
What I sent them was the request. The group would like to know why. You want to come over? And the response was, they're not really sure why. So then we'll wait.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
good.
if they have something, we might before they leave say, the next time we meet, we'll definitely, because we're gonna be in the same building. this time.
That would make it.
So,
Yeah,
we-
we thought we
We
were.
think, that's exactly, we think we're gonna be in the same
They're
building
gonna,
next time.
they're gonna send their email information to you so that they can join the Dropbox, and they would like to pool the resources for all math
Sounds good.
as well.
So do we want to take a 10-minute break then, or?
Sure.
Okay, let's take 10 minutes and break time.
Stick in 10 more minutes, I think I can cover a couple more tables and all my stuff.
You have this side still.
I was gonna say, this is wide open down here.
I know, I just.
Yeah, I worry.
Quite honestly, we will have you down. Okay. Dispose of the evidence, how many candy bars I ate. That's gonna come up with all the structure and.
Maybe one day.
Think about these testicles. So I know you guys would like to change it to the nth degree.
Reserve rooms if they need it. The kids are not.
So we're starting very add, subtract, multiply.
My brother was everything and that a 24 to 27 Valley Peak Park. No,
But I usually wouldn't give them the top.
That's just part of the freeway.
Oh, well, okay, well,
Yeah, because it's like,
some of those are open-ended. I bet you ladies never sat in on something so thrilling. And we all get invited.
I know, that's
L-E-Y, the word nerd.
Oh.
Yes, that's the word I use. That was my Facebook post. Nerd alert, yeah.
It was so exciting. That was mine too.
We don't wanna see what we did.
That was rough the other day.
Yeah, it's important. We're not.
Yeah.
I see they're here.
But I guess,
One
No,
more.
Yeah, I'm not doing good southern there. I'm not saying that doesn't mean.
Somebody
Yeah,
was
right.
where you were.
And she said, well, we can.
I tried watching the day I wasn't here, and I tried to watch it. It's hard to watch for very long, it's just, It's hard to stay 2 million what people want. Somebody would really have to be interested to watch what they do.
It's 48 degrees.
Yeah, it's, when I went to lunch, not only is it cold, but it's, yeah, it's cold.
I did too. And I'm parked, the parking garage way in.
So that made me feel well. So I'm thinking, you know, number two, I'm thinking I just get it number two.
Here's the problem, and that's very happy. I need to towards the back of it, I had to search a lot more. We didn't want to tell the districts what to do, very public, so we tried to, so I was terrified when they to intrude that. This is where I said, you know, it's one day I asked, great, great, but the reality is, once I tried to have the great, everybody else just has to understand it. It doesn't tell you which
It just says by category.
Yes.
For basic operations, that's
It's just a different kind of
I really love it because I go to that 44 classes. Yeah.
Do we do it because if that's supposed to do it?
I know some people can start saying,
We definitely have to.
Occasionally I'd set up last I checked, they were responsible 23 on AZP. We did UCM only required 21.
My brain's a little too much.
I just want to stay away from the better to me.
That's where you say
That's my crazy. That's my goal for this afternoon. It's 2 hours.
2 hours.
Just I couldn't sleep the night, so I found it in one night, and here I am.
Oh, I don't sleep well when I'm away from home. The first night, sometimes the second, really. So, yeah, so that's another week. Like last week. Yeah, I had a lot of driving, I had to go home. My girls were there, right now, we have to go. And I went overnight. But by the time I got to sleep, even though I didn't driving.
We're like,
Not thinking, I don't think I've done this. I think I've done Now I was thinking maybe I should go out and flip, because we live by the years ago. Here. Stop there and then come back to my house and on the way home. At this point,
Yeah, I was writing.
She should have a very, yes.
That should be a document, it pulls up the shelter.
Writing things from the song, I like your short videos, I don't do that. Yeah, I think I was like, how many times there were questions and I said, oh, by the way, how about you? Oh, so what happened? Well, I'm getting into the temple, this one, he said, we're gonna start with
Karen, where'd you park this time?
very exact right order.
I did not, but I didn't have to go back.
Oh, well, that might just, that's about the school thing. Wouldn't give, I wanted to instruction program. We were using it, and I called that night, they were like, people at 3 years old, we said, no, we're not.
I think we do it.
It was laying up there with the
So that happened, and this was
Well, you'd be nice if I
I told the actual theory. The resources they use.
It's a small road.
Okay, I can go ahead and start that. And it's raining outside.
You got went outside.
No, it was.
Oh, I know. Oh, I have my What's this not raining inside? I mean, it's raining outside.
We'll go ahead and get started, but one of the things I think that we had talked about trying to end the day with having a plan for what we wanna try to get accomplished on the 20th, so everybody knows kind of a rough agenda and the ideas on the 20th. And we have a couple of other probably nuts and bolts that we wanna take care of at the end, so at what time would you wanna stop and start making a plan for, our next meeting? Right now?
2:30.
2:30? Okay, so we'll try to be actively engaged until 2:30 and then we'll stop, and try to put together our plan for the next time that we meet, so. We'll get back, let's dig back into this document. I think we kind of tabled the talk about, cosmetic operations, because we're gonna have to do some work and do some more thought, probably research on that, so I think that was probably a wise move.
And leave it, if we think we're equalizing the load, that's a way to do that.
Absolutely.
Balance.
Absolutely.
It's gonna end up in 6th grade.
Yeah.
Everything there.
That's what makes us so excited.
I know on Massachusetts, the 10P4, I think that's really, what we've been talking about. I mean, it does go on and say identifying and canceling common factors, and we can have conversations about language.
Yes.
Again, properties with positive integer exponents. I mean, I feel like we've dealt with all that, or we understand the issue being presented even if we haven't resolved it yet. So that seems a little.
Yeah, I think we've taken care of that one. Like you said, there's some language and a few little things, but I think we've talked about that one. And I think we've talked about 5 as well, too.
10P5, do people understand what I mean when I say I don't think they are equivalent? I mean, I get that they're related to each other.
But not
I don't
necessarily
like that equivalence language.
I don't, yeah,
So 10P6, this is an interesting question. I know that, we are the group that is writing the secondary math standards from Missouri, not the group that is now in charge of the world. But is anybody familiar with Gary Rubenstein's blog? Does anybody read him? So he is a longtime math teacher in New York City and teaches at one of the selective admissions high schools there. And he has put out a couple of suggestions for if it were, the world according to Rubenstein, fewer, deeper, would be get rid of absolute value inequalities. And I read that, and one thing we always teach it, and kids always find it hard, and we always don't understand why. Well, that's just me, maybe, but they do find it hard and you always just want to say, but it's so simple. You just have to slow down and take it one step at a time and think it through. And I don't know. So, and I know that absolute value is something that is out there. I mean, you have to have that idea of being able to do that. And of course, if we do absolute value functions. But I just thought I would at least raise that question. Do we really need absolute value inequalities? Rubenstein obviously would say no, but.
and I think that's a good question, and where do we use it? I think it's traditionally always been taught. I always taught in Algebra 1, but that doesn't mean is that it's appropriate and easy, is it even something that needs to be taught in college algebra or higher?
I don't think we do, our college algebra, we do absolute value inequalities. We do absolute value functions.
And I did some absolute value inequalities in my calculus class, but.
I mean, I've taught them in college algebra in the past, but we don't do it.
I know I used them in my delta epsilon course.
Right, yeah, no, the concept of absolute value, I think you do need it, and yes, if you do want to do the delta epsilon proofs in your calc class, they do have to be able to read that, but they're not.
Do you need to lay the foundation?
Do you need to do it here? And I mean, I think it would be, I don't want to use the word radical, but I think that it would be off the beaten path if we did skip it. But I thought I would raise it.
It does sort of come up in statistics and confidence and all kind of stuff, but you can do it without it.
Well, and it may not be something we do in Algebra 1, but, is that something that maybe we look at and find out, is that necessary for all kids to know to be able to do? So that's a good.
So college algebra doesn't teach you.
Well, now this is my college algebra.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but I mean, so why is it in there? There's no real application, and college algebra doesn't teach it.
When I was teaching, I was like Julie, I was kind of like, what don't you understand? Because I connect it with tolerances and stuff, but the curve field doesn't use that method. I mean, to me, there's a connection, but that's not the way they approach it.
That's not the way they approach it.
Are our mathematicians included in
in the review of the document,
in
I
our
don't
list,
know.
the list we have earlier.
And like I'm saying, for college algebra, he may not use it, but I think that part of it, we need to investigate and find
Right,
out,
yeah.
is there any reason to be able to do
Yeah.
that?
And I mean, I don't know either, and I'm not trying to just lose something, I know that his suggestion was that it's not used. I can definitely see a tolerance and an epsilon delta fruit would be essentially the same idea.
It's in their list.
So,
Solve linear equations, absolute value equations, solve linear inequalities and absolute value inequalities. So that's in the higher ed, entry level course competencies. So
That's kind of what I thought.
Wait, that's not what it says.
it's not,
Page 27, 2B.
Okay, I'm looking down too far, yeah, sorry.
But I also remember when we were working on some of that document that, is everything really there, what really needs, that kids have to know before they enter it, so. So that's a good discussion, Julie, we put a big question mark about absolute value inequalities.
well, and I mean, it could go, you know, it could go in algebra 1, but it can also wait till algebra 2. If I mean, if we just have to get it done before the
College
college
algebra or
ends.
something beyond.
And I mean, I am sympathetic to the ideas of tolerances or using computers that way, but I just think through, you know, kids, and they just wanna do it wrong, they wanna say, so you have, you know, so if it's less than, then you have this, and I always just wanna say, you know, can you just reason it out, not try to memorize
yeah,
cases.
because if you give them an absolute value greater than -2, then they switch it.
Yep,
Of course, that's kind of a stupid problem anyway.
but you, and it is, I think they are, and that sort of bugs me about that topic, so, I mean, if we have to do it, then I won't complain about it
That's a
anymore.
trick question.
But, yeah, but I do think that's sort of unnecessary consternation for kids.
Well, and if we do have to do it, maybe the place to put it would be in an algebra 2
Algebra
class instead of
2,
an algebra
where it's
1
not
class.
everybody, and maybe, you know, maybe at least those of us around this table in that situation, you know, try to put ours in context a little better.
I think every time absolute value comes up in Common Core, it's about something.
Yeah, it's in
It's
context.
about distance, it's about, you know. So, I don't think it's just, I don't think there's absolute value inequalities in here all, are there? I don't really understand.
You know, great question.
How about FISCD, when you graph them?
If I'm graphing the functions.
FI, what number, Nancy?
C70,
Graphs where it's even piecewise different functions, including that. It's absolute value functions, not absolute value inequalities.
Yeah, I think that's one place it really shows up, except for in earlier, like in distance and things like that.
I would think even if it's in the CAI report and this group decided it was not necessarily accepted algebra 2, you could have a footnote just explaining it was considered and this is why it's dropped.
Yeah, I think we just need to find out for what purpose and what reason it is in that document, and if it's really that critical to have it, or is it just like a dream of other stuff? There are other things that are more important, I think.
Lots of just a checklist.
Well, it is a compilation of a checklist of a bunch of people, which means you get more than probably any of us do. That was my point about it, is that I don't do all the things in there, even though I add it to the checklist. But when you put it all together, it's not anybody's single checklist problem.
It's like a bunch of things.
It's a compilation, which is part of it's a problematic way of writing standards. You don't want to put everything in the standards that anybody might want, because you'll end up with a mess.
Well, and with, you know, with no disrespect intended, you know, for all we know, it's there because it's just been there for
Yeah,
a generation or two or something,
Or
and
more.
who knows? And that might not be a
Somebody
sufficient
else's
basis.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
so, and I don't know, and I can run down Gary's column and send it to everybody
I already
in
pulled it
case
up.
you're interested in a read, but,
I already pulled it up.
oh, you did?
Yes, it did. Part two of what he thought should be done.
Yeah, he's got a few other things that you can cut out, that's just the one that I remember.
So the absolute value inequalities is a question mark at this point.
Look, I'm just saying, look at REI 11. And the only reason I'm saying it is that it says in the appendix, I just searched for inequalities. And it came up, I've read it, but it's
Anybody have a page?
66
Yeah, 56.
or 99 if you turn your.
Yeah,
flippers
that's
upside
okay.
down.
That's what I told you.
Which number again?
11.
11.
Yeah, but that was a graphic.
Well,
Yeah, but when you solve them, you usually graph them as well. That's one of the approaches that,
Inequalities graphically
yeah,
up in the title again, those two.
and inequality disparity and solve equations.
Okay, so that would be an equation. Am I reading that?
Here's-
Oh,
this is the reason I kind of went back and forth before I said it, is if you look at the cluster, represent and solve equations and inequalities graphically,
graphically.
that's what you're supposed to refer everything back to, it's underneath those standards.
Right,
Then it's not just a function, it is inequality
right.
as well. And so,
But if it's up and backs, it's not an inequality.
well, but when, I think in this document, sometimes when they say equations, they mean inequalities as well. And that's explained in the appendix. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so even when they call it up and backs, it could still be an inequality? That's my question.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, I kind of hesitated,
Yeah,
because when it's saying function, then that's different than
right.
saying it. However, it says, I mean, the cluster is solve equations and inequalities
Mhm,
graphically.
mhm.
So if it's an inequality, then, you know, we need to talk about that part of it.
Of course, I mean, the thing is, we want students to be able to solve quadratic inequalities.
Yes,
It's really not that different.
no, it is.
No, I was thinking.
The way I would do it, I mean, is to use a number line graphical technique and
Absolutely.
test
simple.
points, and it's really the same thing in a way. You
It's
just have to
kinda
get those test points, those boundaries for your test
kinda
points.
like
Mine would be easier because above and below are a lot more obvious in a parabola than they would be.
Well, you're talking about
No,
quadratic.
I was just talking about solving like
It's
x
one
squared plus 2x plus 3 is greater than 0.
Oh.
So where you
One
factor
variable.
in, get your boundary points and you use test points, that's essentially what I would do with absolute value of x
Yeah, I
minus
would
3
say
is greater
test
than
points.
5, I do the same thing, except you have to set it up first.
It kind of corresponds with.
It's not that far of a reach out there, and I think that may be why it's grouped together. You would use graphical techniques for those, and by the way, you use it for other polynomial inequalities greater than 2.
You would.
So the technique is what ties them together to me here, the graphical technique, but
But it's not a concept within context, it's technique.
well, I mean, there is a context for absolute value inequalities. Followers, sizes, and things like that. There are. And there are contexts for quadratic inequalities.
I think by putting it in context would help students understand much better.
I mean, like I said, in our college algebra, we do quadratic inequalities, and there's some really nice, real easy context to make there. I'm trying to think of one of the ones we use where we have two linear expressions, two linear functions actually, and in the context, to find something you actually multiply, and then we try to figure out where it's greater than a certain value. And so it turns out to be, quadratic inequality, and it makes perfect sense to look at it in that context that way, but you can certainly have things just like that in absolute value. Maybe even easier than absolute value.
So for what it's worth, there.
Yeah, thank you.
I
That's
did-
why I asked where's it at,
We
because
have
you can
noticed.
find it. I did a word search and I didn't find
I
that.
search PDFs and I don't spell the whole word
Well,
out,
that's what I
inequality.
was doing too.
Yeah, you just,
Yeah.
You're part of it.
Because then you gotta know what to search.
Yeah,
I was searching absolute value.
No,
it's too big a word.
I didn't find it, so, I didn't know that.
inequality.
Inequality. So, what's our decision about the absolute value and inequality, scrapping, solving,
Place it on the ponder list and move on.
ponder, move
Yeah.
on?
I can
We
leave
have a
it
big
alone.
question mark beside it, so we'll come back to it.
I think that we'll all have time to reflect on it, those of us who wish to, I mean, some of us may.
Well, and one other comment that I might make too, is actually don't mind a graphical method of solving either. And I guess when I was saying that what I sort of do find a little frustrating are, just the algebraic method. Although, and I say that, I have them for number lines and so on. But if you were doing it by some sort of two-dimensional graphical method, I think.
If you could show how that relates to quadratic, because there's so much carryover, you know, the guy in the linear equation and.
Yeah, I mean, or what I was thinking of is if you're graphing an absolute value function, I'm looking to see where that function value is bigger than a certain number or smaller than a certain number. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that helps the question of, tolerances of using it in a context like that, but at least I would find it a more,
Palatable approach to.
yeah.
Well, I think with the tolerances, students would have something, I think right now it's so abstract and why would I ever do it, and this is crazy, but if you could relate it back to, okay, manufacturing, that nothing's perfect, you have some leeway. So here's, I think an application sometimes helps those things so much, but even though that's not really how industry writes it, it's still an idea that if they go that path, they're gonna have to think about it.
And I actually think it's a good one, and I think the idea of tolerances, and that would, it's essentially the same concept as your Cauchy limit proofs, if you do those a lot of places, and skip that these days, but, some people still like them, or they'll even come back and do them later, and so if you did set it up, and so maybe that's a solution too, or in part at least, is, and then this is where maybe you guys can sort of help us figure that out, but that if it is, contextualized, that if it is in that context, and I know sometimes, it's and probably other people that teach the tech stuff that I do, sometimes get a little frustrated, when you're being evaluated as a teacher, and the question is, is she doing real world problems? And, and you just always want to say, not today, I'm sorry.
Some days you have to say that.
Right, and so then I always think, if there's little ways that you can work some of those in, then that's a good thing, and maybe this is an opportunity, at least I think that sounds like a kind of a nice idea, so I don't know, but maybe you guys would be able to help us figure out, how to explain that.
And what I put down in here is I circle up the question mark by it, and then I put tolerances, et cetera, some different ideas to how, I think it helps for teachers to see the need as to why we would do it. I like really approaching it more from a graphical representation than an algebraic method of solving. So I'm gonna put graphical.
No, for sure, that discussion is silly.
That's
Absolute
extremely value.
That's why I said,
Wrong
I
or-
said, see, we're hanging longer than.
Safer.
They went up and looked at box and whiskers last night. Yeah.
Put some stars and streamers by it too, since you got circles and question marks.
I personally think that should have been our last break, is to make a human box and whiskers.
Oh, we could have done that. I think we need to do that sometime.
I'm working on it.
It's the one that comes with it.
Yes, on the bottom of this.
So 10P7, it says solve everyday problems. And I've been noticing that a lot of us do keep coming back to that idea of a context. And maybe everyday problems and real world problems, maybe those are not the right word word choices, maybe problems, that do have a context. And I think that's, at least I'm hearing people, it's something that I know I have thought for some time that, having decontextualized problems is a recipe for kids not remembering a thing.
Yeah.
And so if we clarify that that's what we're looking for, that it doesn't have to, look and feel like an actual problem that, some group of engineers are somewhere trying to solve at this moment. But just trying to have it be something that would be in a context that a kid can understand.
Just make sure you put in your glossary then that context is another way of saying everyday problems or real world problems, because that's the buzzword everybody's looking for right now. So if you, I understand your concept, but you gotta say we're addressing.
And 5 or 6 years ago, when we tried to put things in context, everybody wanted the word context. They
Right.
said contextualize a problem, they wanted all that removed,
Yeah.
because what does that mean? And so, but I do like the word context maybe better, because it does mean real world, it does mean this. There's a variety of meanings to it, so I really do like that better.
Yeah, I think the other key word, not synonymous, but the other key word in there is modeling.
Yeah, that's true.
That is a very current word, and it's very important. Common Core used it, and so does this one too.
Right.
Using mathematics to model.
I do think Anne's point is well taken though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Having
agree.
words that, that we math teachers think are really hot words, we do have to think about the fact that we have a wider audience. And so I think that's.
Well, and we, sitting around this table as math teachers, is not every math teacher throughout the course of the same too.
I'm
So
not crazy about every day as much as I am.
I don't like every math. Yeah.
Some of the problems aren't every day.
Yeah.
I have never looked at the tolerance of steel and it's not what I was like.
Well, I know we talked a lot about tolerances in my calculus class too, and, and it was really interesting. At one time, I had a kid in my classroom who was a professional race car driver, so we talked about tolerances on engines, and he really, I said, so when we talk about this, he goes, oh yeah, you can't have a tolerance of that much, you will die. So it's kind of like, he could really bring up some good examples of why we need to do these things, so that was great. So when we're looking at solving everyday problems, when we look at that, do we want to say solve problems? You were talking about doing more solving problems in context instead of saying something of that nature.
I do, but I think we can sort of use all of those words because I think it is important that people understand. And I know sometimes when you look at that phrase "real world," you think, "Come on, we are in high school. Are you kidding me? We can't solve real world problems. We're just trying to get up to speed on some normal algebra, But but I do think that the idea of a context, I think that is clear to teachers. But I think that, I'm not saying I have the answer to this right now, but I think if we work on language, maybe we can come up with something that communicates that information, but that doesn't sound so breathtaking to somebody, so like Anne's example, from sometime yesterday or something of communicating clearly to a new teacher who is in a small school district where, he or she's just gotta figure it out. And making that, not that you would encourage people to check out the resources, but make it so that there's a minimum of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would say I would rather not say solve everyday problems, because that almost sounds like you're looking for one answer here. To me, what this is about really is modeling, using mathematics, using all these kinds of functions to model real world situations. Then there's thousands of things you can solve from that. I mean, the solutions are numerous. It's the modeling that's the real key. That's,
That kind of goes back to our analysis earlier of SSE, if you're seeing the structure.
Yes.
Yes, instruction is important.
Because I think when people read solve problems, they think word problem, one answer. And that's not what we're talking about.
But I should say that
Yeah, I do too.
the structure.
Yeah, but I think you're exactly right. When they see this, they're gonna go, word problem only has one solution. Word problem has one solution, and it becomes very rote, very procedural, and not really helping the kids understand the modeling approach that we want to take.
And they use modeling in this, but if I turn it around.
Yeah, so just scratch out the first 4 words there, so say solve everyday problems. problems. You can say model, everyday rule, whatever we're gonna call them, problems using, blah, 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 blah.
Say data even.
I knew you did it.
Baby.
Okay, where we headed, Ken?
Can I interject just 1 second? I do appreciate you guys coming to the meeting, and for anybody who weren't there this morning at 9, I'm representing Kurt Dog, sponsor of 14 Women, so thank you guys for coming. The letter that we just passed out is the answer to one of the 3 questions that were unanswered this morning, dealing with the show me standards, GLEs, and frameworks, and so that research did out to Margie from testing and verification on that. And so I'm still working on, I'm gonna get legal counsel, written legal counsel on the sunshine requirements, what that means to you guys for future meetings. And then I'll submit the rest of the answers via email to everybody once I get it.
And because bringing that up, and we might have discussion about that, is the sunshine law. If we work outside, like I go home and I work.
And what I'm gonna do is
together.
I'm gonna get a set of procedures of what would be required of you if you were to meet, do a teleconference or something along those lines. If 2 or 3 of you meet together, that's not sunshine.
So we don't have to worry about it, 2 or 3 of us wanna meet together and work, that wouldn't be.
No, where 2 or 3 of you gather, sunshine does not, is not also with you. It's when the whole group meets. Right.
Okay.
That would be it.
So if we would meet and have some discussions outside, but always bring it back to the group, then that's okay to do, so like if.
And I'll get more clarification. Legal counsel is drafting up clarification.
Right.
And I will send that out to everybody so that you know what is expected.
Because we wanna be open and transparent about everything we do, we don't wanna violate that, we don't wanna do something that we come back.
Exactly, which is why I'm getting it from the legal counsel from the House, written out, so that way, because they're just gonna go through the sunshine law and say, this is the requirements for a meeting under sunshine, and then you'll know what the expectations are. They're not that difficult, but they'll be written out.
When will we know that?
Under the Attorney General's
Hopeful,
website.
beginning of next week, probably, maybe possibly the end of the day, but I don't know if we can get done that fast.
Yeah, we'll be after we're gone.
It'll be after you're gone today, but I'll email it out.
Would you-
The school board, like, when we send emails to the whole group, that is sunshine law.
Right.
Because that is
Exactly.
technically
Yes.
a meeting being had, so,
Right.
not that we care if somebody wants to sunshine our emails, but just, that is sort of a meeting.
Absolutely.
One of the, an email was sent from an FAQ from the Attorney General's website. And quoting from the website, it is under a question of members of the board get together and talk about the business outside of meetings. Is that a violation? The response is, in essence, no, it doesn't qualify as a meeting if there is not a quorum. However, for example is the sunshine law will apply to meetings of groups with less than a quorum when the entity is deliberately attempting to evade the sunshine law. For example, a public government body may not purposely meet in groups with less than a quorum to discuss public business and then ratify those decisions in subsequent public meetings.
So that'd be basically making the decision and then publicly holding a
Right.
hearing where the decision.
We wouldn't be making the decision, we'd just be.
Working on things, bringing it back to the
Public-
group.
Yeah, but that's totally
There-
true on
there
the school
was-
board. You can meet with other
A
people and
real world
discuss.
example to that point, the reason that's in the sunshine law. The old St. Louis Police Board, way back in the day, the president of that board would have the board meet with him for lunch. They would do all the real business.
Yeah.
And then they would go and have the public hearing, and then, of course, the Post-Dispatch sued and won, and, but anyway, so that's the rationale for that. So I'll get you written
Right.
counsel from House Legal on the sunshine law.
Because we know that the days that we have in our calendar, the days we have that all of us can meet together are very limited.
Exactly.
Time, so we need to get a lot of productive work
Absolutely.
done.
Which is why I want to make sure
Back
you
to
understood, you can use email or conference call, because they want you to think you had to be here physically in order to have a meeting.
And there was one other thing that wasn't brought up this morning too, but I do want to find out is that, I know there's no money appropriated for the work that we're currently doing right now.
Yes.
And a lot of us are putting money out of our own pockets right now
Yes.
to come and visit, so
Um,
I know they had talked about possibly doing something like that
I
in
can't do that until January.
Right, but is it going to be possibly retroactive to reimburse us that have already spent a lot of money on their own to come out or not?
I don't know.
Well, I know it can't be done now, I just hope you keep that in your thoughts.
I will keep that in my thoughts, and so we do the supplemental budget, and that's usually in February. It's usually relatively early in session, and so I will work. It shouldn't be terribly difficult because, quite honestly, you know, compared to the whole state budget, the cost of these working groups isn't a whole lot, and so I will try to see if we can.
You haven't seen our bills yet, no.
They all stay at the Capitol Plaza.
That's better than staying at the Dollar Tree. So, yeah, I will work on that, and
Sure,
I think it's achievable, and so.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you just looking into it, I appreciate that.
No problem, I appreciate you guys doing this. I don't mean to take up your time, I do need to get to the other groups, so unless there's any other questions, I'm just gonna discreetly.
Here's the thing, if you did not receive an email from me, it's because Jesse didn't give me your email address. Okay, telling you that he would have the meeting on this morning at 9 o'clock. If you did, I have your email address. So if you didn't, on the top of that paper is his email address and my email address. And so if you just send me an email, I'll add you to the list to make sure that you guys get all the emails that are gonna be generated, answering all your questions, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a good weekend.
Keep
You
up the
too.
good work.
Thank you so much for everything.
Well, I'm glad we got that answered about that. Before I'm something else. Okay, good. So are we finished with 7 that I said, we want to model problems using linear reciprocal? Do we want to say model and solve? But not just modeling, but we really want to solve the problems well.
Would address situations be generic enough to get to what Bob was saying, that you're not solving?
Well, I mean, I think you do solve, but I think the modeling comes first. So you could say
Generate solutions.
modeling, use modeling of linear, reciprocal, quadratic, whatever, in order to solve problems or solutions. Yeah, I like that. Sometimes the problems don't come up till you model.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly the same questions and comments that you apply to the GPA, right?
And then I think where you break apart is what's appropriate at what. And what's this one just says? It says linear, reciprocal, quadratic, or exponential, and then including compound interest. So those are just direct and variation type. So what we have to address is at what grade level, what course level would we expect, and which ones would we expect to do that. And I noticed that very seldom do they put in logarithm in it.
Well, we're on 10.
Yeah, that's in.
Yeah, so that would be something that this is not 10, we'd probably do the same idea and expand it to logarithmic when we get into algebra 2 and polynomial. And haven't we kind of I'm not mistaken, in 10 PA, haven't we kind of taken that into 8th grade and we solve systems of linear equations in 8th grade?
Logarithmics in 12.
Is in 12, okay. So solve systems of problems of linear equations. That's the thing.
Yes, not inequalities though.
Right, no.
I think that it's okay to have inequalities, but I think that they're pretty, friendly coefficients.
In 8th grade.
Yes.
So we need to bring it up and address it.
They're kind of, introduction to this is what we're doing, and this is a nice, easy way to solve it, and then go ahead and smack them in the face when they get in algebra.
Just knock them in the face. I also know that I believe in the Common Core in algebra 1, they also solve linear to simple quadratic. Is that not true? I think they solve linear to quadratic.
For sure, linear exponential, isn't it?
I thought it was linear and quadratic in algebra 1,
Linear
but it was.
quadratic.
I thought it was linear and quadratic in algebra 1. And I think that was in the thing that said linear to quadratic.
Linear and quadratic is AREI 7. That the one you're looking for?
And then we take 8 and 9 and have them do that sort of extra document.
I don't know specifically, 7, they've specifically gone for linear algebra. What about our degree 1 and 2?
Yeah, in algebra one, they do linear to linear to quadratic systems. Yeah.
Linear to exponential too. So no, in algebra one?
I don't see it.
Yeah. Linear and exponential is not in algebra one. Well, it's solving systems involving linear. Now solving, doing some work with exponential, yes, but solving systems.
Gotcha.
I think there's one that talks about maybe the growth.
Right.
Comparing growth.
Comparing
That's what I was
Right.
thinking of.
Comparing growth but not solving, yeah, I think you're right.
So we done with E.
9, 10, I think so. Do we want to add in linear to quadratic? Or is just put that as a question mark if we're gonna do with linear to quadratic and algebra one systems, it's under 8.
I think it's appropriate if we
I do
take, they
too.
started linear in 8th grade, then a little more,
Right.
then
Here's
a
what,
little more heavily in algebra 1 and then linear quadratic.
and here's, but I would like to limit it to linear and quadratic because we had a discussion, does that mean that's also quadratics? I mean, I'm fine with parabolas, I'm not fine necessarily with doing, with all the comics to do ellipses and hyperbolas. I'm not necessarily fine with that because the kids don't even know what that shape is at that point. I don't know what your opinion is, but.
So you would limit it to, are you saying that you would do, a single, quadratic function and a linear function as a system, or 2 quadratics as a system, or do you just wanna make sure that you're not talking about circles and ellipses and hyperbolas?
I kind of want to make sure that I'm not talking about things they have no idea of what even those they are. But when they're looking at an equation, I want them to know that they see a quadratic equation, what that shape should look like. So they should say, okay, I have a line. I can see it and visually see that it's going to intersect it in 2 points, 1 point, or no points. When you see the other quadratics, they have no idea what those shapes even look like. And that's my
Functions of X.
Yeah, functions of that, yeah.
Yeah, the example in Common Core is a line and a circle,
Circle, yeah.
so we would not want that.
Yeah, and actually, we called to find out if it's just a line or circle, and they said it was any quadratic, and I had an issue with that. It should be,
So we're
So
going again,
let's
we're
fix
back
that.
to circle stuff.
We're circling around. We're circling around, there
If
we
they
go.
haven't done comics yet, then they shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
They've done quadratic
They've done
functions,
practice.
and by that meaning,
Yeah.
parabolas where X is the square variable.
And they haven't done circles at this point. They haven't done the equations of the circle. Certainly they know what a circle is, but they haven't done an equation of a circle yet. So I just hesitate having them solve a system where they have no idea what that shape in algebra 1, what it might look like. So that's just, so we can put linear quadratic in, but we're really defining for algebra 1 that it is a function of X.
Quadratic function, y equals X, yep. Agreed.
I just wanted to make sure, because sometimes when we say quadratic, that's really a lot more than sometimes what we, I think we naturally, when we talk about it, think of it as a function of X. That's what we just naturally think about, but that's, we need to make that clear.
Right, I think, well, I know this came up a few years ago when Common Core first came out. Some teachers were thinking, what would the comic sections be quadratics?
And now,
They are,
yeah.
but I don't think they knew that.
No, I don't think the teachers knew that, but.
That's, yeah, so, but here we're gonna make it clear that that's, the expectation is that it's not the other
Right.
things, just,
When they get in algebra 2, that's fine, well, even in algebra 2 though, if they haven't studied the electronics, I don't know, but we'll have to talk about that when we get there.
This will be the Kathy preliminary.
Oh, there you go, there you go.
No, I don't know that they have to do this with any of the comics, but you could do it as part of your comics unit, I guess.
And, yeah,
It may be wrong, but I was thinking that currently in your accelerated algebra for 8th grade, there are some functions that are listed as algebra 1 standards, but that are not in the 8th grade algebra 1.
well,
I don't know, that's why I was gonna go.
yeah, we can find
Because
Yeah,
I
there is a
remember-
separate thing in the
that's what I
back
was
on
trying
eighth
to look.
grade,
we accelerated, yeah.
I think.
And I was, because I remember we had emailed Jay last year or somebody and say,
Jay?
which ones of these, there was some, like, which ones of these functions are we supposed to do and which ones are we not? And I'll keep looking, you guys keep your discussion.
Okay, so you keep looking for us?
Yeah.
You don't wanna have a comment section?
No.
Discussion?
That's probably where it stopped, because we don't start geometry.
Okay, so it's 2:30 and we set, because if we got into something else, we would just get started and then stop. So shall we stop and make an agenda of what we want to get accomplished? We're only gonna be here for one day. Hopefully we've gotten clarified that we can, because work outside. So hopefully we've gotten that clarified. Before we start talking about our agenda, I just want to make sure that this is our supply list that we need to have for when we meet again. And we don't know where it's gonna be. Well, we do know it's, well, when we think it's going to be. That's where it's scheduled to be, is in the Jefferson Building, I think first floor conference room, isn't that what it said?
Yes.
Yeah. And if you haven't been there before, you kind of keep going. Just walk in on the first floor and you keep going to the back and you'll see it eventually. But the supply list was asking for, maybe pencil, sticky notes, markers for a waiting room, name tags for table tents. Do we want poster paper? Poster paper? Computers and bags, I would assume that's for you, right? Okay. Web camera, I'm assuming that's for you. Will we need a projector? I think there's one in that, if we're in that room, I think there's one in that room that we can hook up to.
The website says room 470, is that?
Oh, room 470 where? Is that in the governor's office building? Cause that would be,
Hold on a second, it might be.
cause that would be the governor's office building.
No,
I
I
don't think that's.
That's first floor.
It is, right, yeah, I'm sorry, I thought it was something else.
So first floor conference room, and if I remember, it used to work, there used to be a projector in there. Clickers, we don't need. Power strips, do we want? Cause that room is a little bit better as far as having it, but do we want extension cords too, just in case?
Yeah.
And extension cords. Lunch tickets are definite. Sign-in sheets, rolling cart, you didn't put that down, but you want a rolling cart?
Oh, go ahead and put it down. I thought you'd all help.
Wake her up, she's screaming.
And I think the room reservations have already been made for that date and that time as well. One other thing that before we start making the agenda, thank you, Karen. One other thing before we start making the agenda for next time, is Jay said that they're looking at rooms and spaces, but they want to make sure that those are the dates because it's very difficult for them to get rooms and spaces as it is. So if we agree, we made a motion that those are dates, and that's what we're gonna stick with unless we have inclement weather. Would that be the understanding of everybody in this room?
Did we do the 19th or the 30th?
30th.
We did the 30th.
Right, okay, that's what I put down, I just wanted to
Yeah,
make sure.
because we could not get, to get in on the 19th, that would probably be a problem. So we're firm on those dates. They're not tentative dates, they're dates that we've all agreed to. Because I think when somebody starts, I think it's hard when they get a room and they cancel. I imagine the logistics are not always easy. I guess if we canceled and found another date, we could go someplace else, but I don't know how that would be. So right now, we're pretty firm on those dates.
We do need to make note that if we know we can't be at one of these, we need to let us all know, because there's too many of us, there's no sense.
Right, so Nancy would be our main contact on that. I think she's got an email distribution list that we could contact her. And then she would know, I would think, if enough people are contacting her, that we're not gonna have a forum and email out the group to see what we would do at that point. So I'm fine with let Nancy do leave if she doesn't mind
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
that.
that's fine.
Okay. She would also be the person that, of course, we're gonna meet before then about inclement weather, if for some reason we're not gonna be able to make it. Okay. An agenda for our next meeting. Okay, it's October 20th, it's a one day, but it sounds like we may be meeting with the elementary school team. The K-5 team might be, would we wanna meet at the beginning or the end of the meeting, or do we need to find out from them? Because we're only gonna be there one day, and I think they're planning on being there both days.
Do we know when they're meeting, Kathy?
When? What time on that day?
Yeah, because this time we did yesterday, so
That's true, they didn't start off.
we need to find that out. I would suggest again, and I'm not trying to scare my
Yeah.
people with this, but
I agree,
if we know ahead of time why.
right.
what
Then we
they
can
wanna
have some of
talk
those,
about, instead of just an open forum.
I agree,
We've done better when we've had a reason what we're talking about. So
and we get very targeted and specific on that.
we may already have the answers for them,
Right,
but
But
they
we
still
might
may
be-
wanna meet and ask other questions, that's fine.
sure. And then I would rather meet at the end of that day than at the beginning of the day, because they probably don't even know what questions they would have at this point to start off the day. So if they wanna meet with us, they need to have some specific questions that they want to need to dialogue about. All right,
That's the 20th, right?
yes.
And I
And
think,
so we need to let them know we're not meeting on the 21st.
I think the very end of the day could be difficult if we find that we're someplace that we need to wrap up, since we're only meeting one day.
What about,
Like,
right before lunch?
I would,
Either right before or right after lunch, do that around lunchtime so that we can get those issues addressed before we, Monica's a really good suggestion.
well, I mean, I just, with the drive, I wish not to be after 4 o'clock if we're just meeting one day.
I understand, I fully agree, because you're the one that night and do it work early next morning.
It's gonna be dark at 5, so.
Not quite, but close. Daylight savings time still on for another 2 weeks after that. Gotta get those trick or treaters in.
So are we thinking like 11 or 1? I guess it depends on if they need it in or not.
True. Yeah. So like we from 11 to 11:30, or else we go from 11:30 to like 12:15, and we go from 12:30 to 1 to meet with them or something like that. But we try to keep it very limited, no more than 30 minutes. Right? Okay, so if we need to meet, we wanna know why and what the purpose is, what questions they have, so that we can kind of work together on that. I think I just think we made tremendous progress on what we did yesterday and today, and I'm really pleased. I'm hoping we can continue in that same fashion. So when we come back, we do wanna continue to work with the Massachusetts document and the Common Core document, and try to do our best to start with algebra and then finish off, the algebraic content, and I think the algebra and the, data that day, and then maybe look at geometry another day. I don't know if we've had enough time to do geometry.
When you say algebra, you mean functions as well.
That's correct, I'm sorry, yes. Try to finish, yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought that up, yes. So try to finish algebra and functions. I think it would be natural to go to functions right after that, because they really fit in with one another.
And you said algebraic content.
Yes,
It is.
So that we really look at algebra and functions, for both the Massachusetts and the Common Core document, really look at those. Make sure we have those, because I think if we had those done, we can really start doing a lot of work. That we can really start thinking through that process. And then, if we finish that, to me, the next piece, or to you guys, what would the next piece be after that? If we got algebra and functions,
that big overall structural question.
yeah. That maybe that's a part of that day as well, because if middle school's gonna work, and that might be something we also need to talk about with the K-5 group. What is
And you
the
said the
structure?
overall structural.
Well, I don't feel
How
like
we're organizing the material.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't feel like we came to a conclusion as to what to do with the integrated versus.
Oh,
general.
that one.
Yeah, that's a whole other ballgame.
I think that work groups can kind of give us a suggestion. When we break into those work groups, it seems natural. When I think of high school, I think it would be nice in either of these documents, if any of them we've been looking at, if you have a standard that's gonna apply to more than one course or level, that you put what it means here and you put what it means for here, or you have an A and a B, or you know, and we keep it consistent so that teachers can readily identify, oh, this is what I'm doing here, and this is what the kids are gonna follow it up with when they get this next course.
I think that's helpful to teachers to see, this is where they're gonna go with it in the next course in Algebra 2, and it's also helpful in Algebra 2 to say, oh, this is where it came from in Algebra 1, so they've already had this
So
material.
whether
Yeah,
it's
they-
above
they
and
may
below
be-
or side by side or.
Somehow.
And I felt like at the end of that discussion, we were leaning towards where we are now, which is essentially we do the standards for algebra, algebra 2 geometry, and people who do integrated figure out when they're taking this test.
But, and the question will be though, is do we have a front page that has all of the things addressed for the high school, and then that additional page, so these are the high school standards. We address, this is algebra 1, this is algebra 2, this is geometry, and then have the course structure. Is that kind of what you're talking about, Amy?
Yeah, because it's gonna make a real difference as to how you start writing if you don't know what the format
Well,
is.
and the one thing that I think that Tiffany has said that she really likes for, middle school is that one page overview for algebra 1, that's like kind of the big ideas and the focus areas. So I think if we're gonna do that for middle school, that would be helpful for high school teachers as well, to keep that kind of thing continuing to go, because you're gonna have teachers that teach at different grade levels. What do you think, Julie?
I do
I'm
think
not
she's
even
got
adding on, I'm just talking, I think I'm starting to get.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah,
Jeremy answered me again on the integrated. He said he believes Clever, Missouri is using it,
okay.
and that he remembers one other district contacting him about it, but he doesn't remember the district. So we're talking about 520 whatever districts, and
Clever's very small.
Yes. It's pretty clever.
It's not like peculiar, but you know.
Hey, that's, do you know how they got their name?
Very
They
tough.
just, I don't know, something, they said, well, just something, give us something peculiar, give us something peculiar, so they wrote peculiar. It's kind of interesting. So, really want to get focused on algebra and functions. Our goal would be to finish that. What would be our next steps after that?
Well, then are we talking about trying to decide, you know, I feel like we're doing really good work all together, but with that said, I think we could probably figure out subgroups that would be able to be the most suited
Right.
to, you know, try to get, and I think probably a lot of people would agree that being an editor is a lot easier than being the first drafter. So if we can, and I don't wanna, you know, but it seems like we've got some pretty good balance here in the group as far as trying to, so how would we do our groups? Would we do a middle school and then a algebra 1 and then,
Well, and part of it is that whenever you write it too, you have to come back and make sure the language flows, and we're gonna have to make sure the language flows K through 12. Because that's one of the niceties about the Common Core document, it's the same group of people that worked on K through 8, so it was a similar language throughout, and you get to the high school when it was written by a totally different group of people. So if you're gonna have people sit down and look at one document, it would be nice that we use some checks on how they flow. And even though I'd say algebra 1 and algebra 2, I'm thinking Bob really has great input into the data at all levels. And so it could be that we divide it up, but once we decide the data that, or decide certain pieces, that certain people really work on those elements at more than one level, I don't know, but
So
we can,
maybe after we get through algebra functions, we talk about how we're gonna divide this.
I think so. I think
yeah,
so.
and I don't know if that suggests an outcome, but I'm, you know, I mean, I don't wanna start pigeonholing people, but
Right.
you know, maybe we all think about that and then everybody as an individual think about where they think they would be the most helpful. You know, and again, not to bring it up now, but that's something that we try to address
Right.
on the 20th. And then probably clarify what we hope to have accomplished by those subgroups
By certain dates.
at that point where we come back together again as a whole group in January.
So give it, and so if we, by the end of our meeting that day, try to get a feeling or a timeline of where we think we can be by that time and what we're working.
That was also nice. I mean, I think that gives us a nice, shot of time, and I think we need that, and I do think that, I mean, I'm not a patient person, but, at all, really, but I think we need to, try to, I'll work on myself, and I think we need to just all realize that, we have a year, and I'm not saying that we should wait till the weekend before, but I do think that, to think about it, and I know for me, when I force myself to wait, sometimes it gels and I get what I think are pretty good ideas, so.
Right.
So that's where I think we should, I think our plan sounds good.
Okay,
I just have my mind,
so the algebra functions, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, I cut you off, go ahead, so.
see, if we don't talk for a long time, you only have to say one thing, and the world stops. Just for clarification, I'm not hearing that we go past algebra 2, is that not something we write a standard for? It doesn't?
And that's part of where the clarification, you're right, that we haven't really talked about that, do we write standards to be practice or beyond algebra 2 or not? And that's a really good
As
question.
weak of a math student as I was, I took trig. It's hard to see.
You're in charge of trig.
Where we need to pigeonhole ourselves, that makes sense.
Well, and I think we're all sort of, still really thinking about that because it is a great question. And, we haven't, the way that Common Core does it is they have all those things designated with a plus sign. Now there is some trig in geometry and there's some trig in algebra 2, or at least that's the way people usually do it. So depending on what level, but so then, we have talked about taking things like we specifically addressed vectors and matrices that we thought, we would put additional topics recommended for like honors classes or for pre-calc. Just for myself, I'm a little reluctant to prescribe standards for pre-calc because I think it means different things at different schools. My pre-calc class is a dual credit pre-calc class. So we take marching orders from the college that offers that credit through that. So, the kids don't have to do that. They can just take high school credit, but you wouldn't have to do it that way. Other classes, there's AP Calc, AP Stats. Those are classes that schools do offer that would not necessarily fit in with what we do, nor would our decisions be. And I'm struggling for words here, but I'm saying we just need to hesitate about that before we are prescribing,
Yeah, they're
but,
just not relevant to them.
Yeah, but there is an option to take those, vectors and matrices and other things that you just wouldn't get to and have a sort of general, topic list that is for, additional coursework, additional studies, because algebra 2, the way that it has been, grade level is that's your junior year. In practice, a lot of kids do end up having that as sophomores, at least in public schools and Catholic schools, that's not how they do it. So there's different, there's just a lot of different approaches out there. And so even though I think that, it might be that some of them are better than others, I personally feel a little reluctant to set something down.
So it sounds like the reason the standards end at algebra 2 is they make room for college or dual credit type classes.
And they're not assessed past that,
Yeah.
so standards are, and no, we're not talking about assessment, but I mean, that's
But
what
it's really is.
When they are assessed, it's usually through the college
college,
credits or
yeah.
the college credits or something. Remember, Julie, those were the things that we were gonna call our heart standards.
Yes, and I'm for that. I mean, I'm a think outside the box fan. I think hearts are good. You know,
If you stick something in an appendix and call it suggested topics for advanced studies, and it's not assessed, but at least it allows DESI to continue to be a resource for districts that, can't come up with those things on their own.
Yeah.
It kind of serves.
Well, yeah, because I think you can go a
Right.
lot further into modeling a lot of different things that could really put into there that
Well, a lot of high
stats,
schools have AP stat,
right?
AP calculus, there's lots of
Right.
different things that go on, but those are assessed by AP.
If we build it, will they come now? If we start it, will they then assess it?
I guess part of it is you have to be cautious about if we put it there, do we want them to assess it? Kind of
That's
like
what
you're
I was-
saying,
That's
because
what-
that has happened before. That's really what happened with, when the GLEs were written, because it was written, they were just written generically for 10th grade. And then all of a sudden, okay, now we're gonna grade 9th and 10th grade, so did that really fit with an Algebra 1 curriculum? No, so, you do have to be careful about what you put
Right.
down and what's gonna happen with that. I agree with that.
well, it also brings up that issue that I feel like is not dealt with, clearly. This idea is algebra 2, does that prepare you for college? I mean, I think most of us, if a kid came to us and said, hey, I'm going to college, should I just stop taking math now? We would all say, certainly not, you should take math every year. But that is not something that the state has ever required them to do. Now, some districts do, but I'm guessing most do not, that I am aware of. And so if you are putting those topics in there, I mean, then you're giving that some credence and you're giving ideas and, but the question is, how do you present it? Do you say that that's, additional topics recommended for, college-bound kids?
What's,
I mean, I don't know.
yes, I don't think it's just keep college bound, I think it's, is it Common Core that talks about STEM?
Yeah,
I mean,
STEM.
a person who goes to college who's not in a STEM area, they
Doesn't
only take
necessarily.
one math class,
Right.
or two maybe.
Right.
Or none, if they do a credit in high school, or that's
Exactly.
two, yeah, so that happens a lot. So I mean, there's so many nuances to it, but I think that's why we don't.
Right.
I don't think we
Because
want
it becomes so
to-
divergent, how to go the STEM pathways
I don't think that's our task to do that, but suggestions in that section are good, I think. But
Yeah, and maybe, because I'm listening to all this and thinking about it, but it's an interesting question, and maybe, we do have a role in kind of preemptively providing a partial answer to that question, for parents or anybody that, I mean, I think in math, it's not so much that we're so special, but, we do have all these questions that, are things that a lot of people just don't know. Excuse me.
So our next thing on agenda was to talk about
the group and how we're going to work with the subgroups, middle school, high school.
And/or element.
And or elementary.
Did you want that before geometry or after?
Oh, we need the subgroups, forming subgroups. I think that after we do the functions, we would be ready to roll on out and data, we would be ready to roll on algebra 1 and algebra 2, don't you think, to start? Or subgroup formations, I think we can do that. I don't think it necessarily has to be orderly sequence. We have to figure out, do algebra and functions, I think, before we get anything else done, but. What are other items that we want to get done? K5 maybe? And
We should look at the big timeline with them and
Yeah,
find out
that's
if
true.
there's gonna be a single editor and if we wanna have some big group thing.
We need to share with K5, I don't know if Nancy's done that, but we need to do that, share the dates that we've chosen for, yeah. So they may not be meeting all the same dates, but the dates that we've chosen to meet together, they have one or two of those dates that they might wanna meet at the same time, so that. Because I don't know if they've gotten that far to choose their dates or not. And then what you said too about we can talk with that either there or sometime to make sure things flow. We really wanna make sure that the document flows from kindergarten through high school, that it's not disjointed, so we wanna make sure we have a common flow there. What else?
Did we not, we have our algebra functions, once over up there, did we not do we have geometry, measurement, data, and statistics?
Right. So I think that after we get through those, would our next thing to be looking at, what would be the next topic we would wanna look at after algebra and functions? What would that be?
I think you better put
Geometry
geometry in there.
Here's the next time in most documents.
Yeah.
And how far we get on that, we don't know.
Well, it might be easier because we're not worried about which course and all that. So
That
I
is
think it
true,
might
we
be
can
quick.
really look at delineating, so we're not looking at which course. I think for that day, that's gonna be a
That's
lot.
plenty now.
Because if we get to geometry, you can get started on it, I would be very happy, I don't know if we'll get there or not, but, yeah. And then, at that time, well, and I guess at this point before we leave, are there anything that we need to do as a group between now and then, like kind of last time we were supposed to review and look at documents?
I think it would be helpful if, this is just my opinion, but I think we could move a little quicker and not lose anything if we did these high school a little bit more like we did the middle school, that, where we didn't always go step, 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 step. We looked at a whole and said, what are the things here that are the ones we really want? What are things we don't want? How would we like to change them in both documents? So that it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 every time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We said we were gonna do this as bigger chunks, and we actually did it
We
as
did
small.
smaller chunks, and I think at first it
More
seemed
granular.
okay, but after about 2 hours, I'm like, wait, man, we're really not, and I don't wanna miss anything, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying, if we study it that way ourselves,
Yes,
if we look at them in chunks and say, yes, 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 change this one, kinda like we did with the middle school, I think maybe we might move better.
I totally agree.
Maybe not, we may still go slow, but that's fine if we plan that way, maybe.
I think we had, and we went after we left the last time, we looked at the middle school before we came back, and
Yes.
we had some specifics, and we didn't really take the time, I don't think.
So by next time, really look at algebra and functions and geometry.
Okay, so everybody agrees that we're gonna really look at Massachusetts and the Common Core algebra functions and geometry, so that when we come back, we can be as productive as possible, so we only have one day.
We also need to keep in mind that for future, that we also had said before, we need to look at the exits and the nets and the ACT document.
That's what I was gonna say, I don't know where that comes in the process, but
Yeah, right, and it's gonna come in someplace, whether it's at the beginning, middle, or end, and I think part of that is we might wanna keep kind of track, yes, we've done this, and we've looked at this, so this is where we've gotten there. So,
I think that is, I'm not necessarily promoting checklists, but I think that's a place where it could be appropriate to make sure that because, if we've done our job right, all those things are gonna be in there unless there's some little weird thing
Well, for
somewhere.
example, Margaret noted, what you noted that was the ACT doesn't have 5 polynomials
Right.
at all. So that's the kind of thing, nice to notice that since we
It
have
does
this
have
discussion.
matrices out.
Does have matrices.
yeah, with music.
I wonder if that's why we put them in our curriculum originally, it's something we just took it out because we thought we've got all this stuff to do with, what we have, the standards we have now, that we just thought that's not in there.
And
And I think that's fine if they use their calculator, but I think somewhere they need to know how.
yes, oh, I agree.
I actually think it's a nice, I actually like it, I think it's good for them, but,
I think that's an option to teach, or a strategy to teach, and I think it's good, I don't know how much time, with all the other things there.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you could do it in pre-calc,
Yes.
but
Is it okay for me to, when I send this message to K through 5 to say, each of those days. Right now, we're tentatively planning 9 to 4.
4, 9, 4,
4-ish.
4, 9 to 4. Sounds good. So is there anything else for the good of the group today at 2:54 in the afternoon on Friday afternoon?
Go baseball.
Go Royals, go Chiefs, go Cardinals, go Rams, go the Zoo, go.
Thanks to Sylvan Early for coming by.
Thank you.
Do you have anything to say to us, or just wanted to see if we're?
Well, mostly I just wanted to observe. I have no jurisdiction in here. So I have to be invited to even speak. So,
We
when
can
I-
have you solve a math problem.
You can speak if you can solve a math problem, that's why we're over here.
There was a day when I could do that, and now it's all on my phone. So, but I do want to personally express my appreciation for all of you and for the personal time and commitment that you have made already and will make as we finish this. And I think this is an unbelievably significant event in Missouri's education history as we try to take our standards and own them. And I just think it's very important what you're doing. I think it's unimaginably important to the future of our state, the future of our kids. I've attended for sometimes several of the meetings today. I think this is just the 4th one that I've been in, but in every one, it's clear that the people that are there are not representing some special interest, they're representing our kids.
That's what it should be.
That's what it should be. Yeah. And thank you for that. The rewards to what you're doing are beyond any of our imagination. And I just want to thank you for what you're doing here. And thanks for allowing me to say something.
And it is 2:58.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Any seconds?
I could have done that.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? We're good, we're out of here.
I know, is everybody ready for me to?
Who seconded it? Who seconded the motion? Margaret, okay.
All of it.
All of us. So that would be 2 to the